Hey there, night wanderer. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're in bed or curled up on the couch with a warm blanket. Wherever you are, let the rain outside soothe your thoughts and slow your breath. If you enjoy this quiet corner of the internet, feel free to like the video, and I'd love to know. What time are you listening to this? Drop it in the comments. Are you an early dreamer or a true midnight soul? All right, close your eyes, settle in, and let the story begin. I hadn't planned on coming back. The house had stood vacant for nearly 12 years. My name was still on the deed, technically, but I'd done everything I could to pretend it didn't exist. It was one of those old East Coast relics, a narrow, sloping frame house at the edge of a town no one maps anymore, a place where everything was too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to stay long. I inherited it after my great-aunt Lillian passed. I was 23 at the time, too caught up in the churn of a new life in Chicago to think about some dusty house 4 states away. I let it rot, let the paint peel and the wood warp and the garden return to weeds. But lately, something inside me had changed, or maybe something outside me had pressed hard enough that I cracked. I think it was the silence in my apartment that finally got to me. The kind of silence that bends around you. After the layoffs, I stopped checking my phone. I stopped opening the blinds. I was sleeping too much, or not at all. And then one day, with the dull hum of an early April rainstorm tapping at the window, I remembered the house. It wasn't fondness. It was a pull. 3 days later, I was on the road. I told no one. There wasn't anyone to tell. The drive was long and slow. The rain never let up thin, misting sheets that made the road feel further away than it was. My wipers made a sound I hated, a hollow, rubbery screech. I didn't play music. I wanted to hear the quiet again, to see if it was following me. I got into the town near dusk. Not that it mattered. The place had always looked like twilight. Pale buildings, soft hills, a gas station that still rang up on analog buttons. Nothing had changed. It felt paused. The house was up a narrow dirt path, past a grove of spruce trees that had grown thicker than I remembered. Their trunks twisted in odd angles, like they were keeping things in instead of out. The key still worked. I hadn't expected that. The door opened slower than I thought it would, heavy with time. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and mothballs and wet wood. The windows had fogged. Rain trickled gently down the glass. I stood in the entryway for a while, letting the air press against my skin. It felt like I'd never left, or like I'd never been here at all. I unpacked as little as possible, just a backpack with clothes, some notebooks, and my old camera. I didn't plan to stay long, just long enough to figure out what was wrong with me. I chose the upstairs bedroom, the one with the blue wallpaper and the crooked closet door that never shut right. It still didn't. The wallpaper was peeling now, and something had nested in the upper corner, probably birds, or something worse. But it was dry. That's all I needed. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed, listening to the rain. It came in fits and starts soft, then hard, then gone altogether. But the silence that followed was worse. I kept thinking I heard breathing. Not loud, not even human, just steady, slow, like the house itself had lungs. I told myself it was the wind slipping through cracks in the old wood. I turned over, pressed my ear to the pillow, waited. Nothing. The next morning, I made coffee with a portable stove I brought. Since the kitchen didn't have working gas, I wandered around the house, mug in hand, half-heartedly opening old drawers and testing light switches. Most didn't work. Some flickered, briefly, then dimmed to nothing. I didn't mind. The house creaked, of course. All old houses do, but it didn't creak the way I remembered. It sounded deliberate, like footsteps, but not quite. I chalked it up to the wood swelling from the rain, told myself that enough times. It almost felt true. I found an old photo album on the lower shelf of the hallway closet. I don't know why I opened it. I barely knew anyone in those pictures. Most were black and white, cracked at the edges. A few had names written on the back in tight cursive. Lillian, Edgar. One just said Mother before the incident. I closed that one quickly. At the bottom of the stack was a smaller album. Blue velvet, worn down at the corners. It wasn't labeled. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them, all the same. All of the house. Some from the outside, others inside, all slightly off-center. Most were dim, like they'd been taken at dusk or with the flash off. But one, the very last photo, was taken from the top of the stairs, looking down into the dark entryway. It wasn't the composition that bothered me. It was the date scribbled on the bottom, April 8th. The day I arrived. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because of the photo, because I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of something moving downstairs. Soft, deliberate, not footsteps exactly, but not wind either. I waited, breath held. The noise stopped. Then came the sound of the closet door in my room, creaking open, the one that never shut right. I didn't move. I just listened, and whatever was inside listened too. I didn't open the closet. When morning came pale and gray through the bedroom window, I acted as though nothing had happened. I made more coffee. I walked past the closet without looking at it. I didn't want to give it shape. That's how fear gets stronger, I think. When you look it in the eye. The closet door hung open an inch wider than I remembered. The house was quiet, oppressively so. No birdsong, no dripping. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. By noon, the rain returned. It had the same hush to it, like it didn't want to disturb anything. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, staring at a blank page. I kept telling myself, I came here to write not anything in particular, just something that proved I was still real, that I still had thoughts worth shaping. But all I wrote was a single line. It remembers me. I didn't know what I meant by that, or maybe I did, and that was worse. That afternoon, I explored the attic. It wasn't curiosity, it was compulsion. A kind of heavy magnetism pulling me toward the old pull-down stairs. I'd never spent much time up there as a kid. Aunt Lillian always said it was just storage and shadow. I believed her. But now, I needed to see. The steps groaned under my weight. The attic was stale and close, thick with that sour smell of decayed paper and insulation. Rain tapped the roof in soft arrhythmia. The space was cluttered, but not chaotically. Boxes were stacked deliberately. chairs placed upright, as if waiting for someone to sit in them. At the far end, beneath the triangular slope of the roof, stood a tall mirror draped in yellowing linen. I didn't uncover it. I should have, but I didn't. As I turned to leave, I heard something faint, a voice, not quite a whisper, not words, just breath drawn in slowly, as if the attic itself was watching me, too polite to speak. I left quickly, closed the stairs behind me. The silence followed. That night, the photo album was gone. I didn't misplace it, I'm certain. I'd left it in the drawer beneath the hallway table. But when I opened it, the drawer was empty, not even dust inside. Just a clean, hollow space, as if nothing had ever been there. But I felt watched when I checked, like something was standing just behind me, arms folded, patient, and waiting. I didn't turn around. I started noticing changes in the house. Small things, at first. A lamp that faced a different direction than the day before. A rug that seemed just slightly out of center. The basement door was open one morning, even though I'd left it locked. I could swear I'd locked it. There was no wind that strong, no animal that quiet. Once, I came downstairs to find muddy boot prints in the entryway. Just a few, maybe 5 or 6, all headed inward, none leading back out. I cleaned them up without thinking, without letting my mind catch up to what my hands were doing. That's how you survive things like this, I think. You let your body go on autopilot. You pretend the abnormal is temporary, peripheral. The trouble starts when you start noticing everything. I stopped sleeping, not out of fear, exactly, but because I couldn't find rest in a house that felt like it was listening. I would lie in bed, eyes open to the darkness, and hear it shift. It never made loud sounds, nothing sharp, just soft creaks, sighs, the click of something settling into place. But the pattern changed each night. It was always closer. One night, I woke up to find the closet door fully open. Inside, everything looked normal: dusty coats, stacked shoe boxes, the faint scent of cedar. But when I looked again, just for a moment, I thought I saw the shape of something hunched in the corner. It didn't move. I blinked. It was gone. On the 5th day, I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. It was on old yellow paper, creased, the ink faint and blotted. No envelope, no signature, just 3 words, written in uneven hand. Don't follow it. My chest tightened. The house was empty. It had always been empty. I hadn't heard anyone enter, but the note was warm, like it had just been handled. The rain had stopped. Outside, the trees were utterly still. That afternoon, I walked to the edge of the grove behind the house, the same grove I used to avoid as a child. The trees there leaned in unnatural ways, bent low, as if whispering to each other. That's when I noticed the path. It hadn't been there before. I swear it hadn't. A narrow trail, pressed deep into the damp earth, winding away from the house into the woods. I stood at the edge for a long time, listening, not to the wind, there was none, but to the invitation in the silence, the way the world seemed to hold its breath for my next step. I didn't follow it, not yet. That night, I dreamt of the house, but it wasn't this house. It was wider, older, endless. The walls moved, breathing in slow, tidal pulses. And in every mirror, I saw myself looking back. Except it wasn't me. Not quite. The dream ended with me standing in the attic again, facing the mirror. I reached for the linen covering it, pulled it back, and woke up screaming before I saw what was underneath. When I looked in the mirror by the hallway the next morning, my reflection lagged behind by half a second. Just enough to notice, just enough to wonder which one of us had blinked first. The next morning, I boarded up the attic. It was an instinctive act, almost ceremonial. I dragged an old bookshelf from the hallway and wedged it across the attic pull-down. I nailed shut the frame where the stairs folded down. I even sealed the cracks with masking tape, anything to keep it from opening on its own. I told myself I was being paranoid, but it wasn't fear driving me, it was containment. As if I'd seen something through the dream, through the mirrors, that shouldn't be allowed out. Still, the air in the house changed. More pressure in the walls. A faint vibration in the floorboards. The quiet had deepened. It was no longer absence, but presence. The house was no longer waiting. It was watching. The path through the woods grew longer. I didn't walk it, but each day it seemed to stretch further, winding deeper, narrowing like a throat. From the upstairs window, I could see something dark in the distance, a shape. It never moved, but it was always there, just past the last visible bend. A part of me believed the note, "Don't follow it." Another part whispered, "You already have." My perception of time began to unravel. I'd make coffee in the morning and blink to find the cup untouched. And cold hours later, the sky shifted colors in ways that made no sense, sometimes blue at midnight, sometimes pitch black by 3 in the afternoon. The clocks in the house stopped ticking altogether, their hands fixed at impossible angles. One night, I awoke to see my bedside clock blinking 3:17 a.m. Again, it had become a refrain. That exact minute 3:17 reappeared in places I didn't expect. On the microwave, on my phone, even when it was off, scribbled in the dust on the window pane. Something always happened at 3:17. That night, it knocked. 3 gentle taps at the front door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another 3, slower this time. Then silence. I crept to the landing and stared down into the entryway. The door was slightly open, just a crack. The rain had started again, but only outside. I could hear it, but no droplets struck the windows. It was like the sound had been brought in without the water. I closed the door, locked it, then turned around to find muddy footprints behind me. Not in a line, but a circle, like something had walked around me as I stood still. The mirrors became unreliable. At first it was the lag. Then came distortions, angles that didn't match the room, objects that shouldn't be there. A coat I didn't own hanging behind me. A second doorway that didn't exist. My eyes looking just slightly too far to the side. The worst was the bathroom mirror. I caught myself smiling once. I wasn't smiling. It lasted half a second, that twisted grin on my own face, while my real expression was frozen in dread. I didn't look again for days. When I did, it was worse. The photo album returned. I found it sitting on the kitchen table one morning, even though I had never brought it downstairs. The photos were different now. Still, the house always, the house, but changed. Angles that couldn't exist. A hallway that stretched too far. A door where no door had ever been. The final photo had changed, too. Still from the top of the stairs. But now the figure in the entryway was visible, just a blur, a smear of something tall and wrong, halfway into the house. Its arms were too long, its head tilted too far. The date at the bottom now read, April 11th. Today, at exactly 3:17 that night, I woke to find my bedroom ceiling gone. Above me, the attic pulsed. I don't mean I heard it, I saw it. The boards flexed in and out, as if something huge and alive were breathing just beneath the roof. The mirror from the attic, the one I'd never uncovered, was hanging above my bed, suspended in impossible darkness. I saw myself in it, asleep, but I was awake. I closed my eyes and prayed to disappear. The next day, the house restructured itself. The hallway was longer than it had been. The stairs turned slightly left, then slightly more. The kitchen had an extra cabinet I didn't remember. The rooms were never in the same place twice. I began marking the walls with chalk, arrows, notes, measurements. Each night, they faded. Each morning, they returned in new handwriting. One message kept repeating, scribbled low near the floor. The house is not what moves. I stopped trying to explain it. Stopped trying to think of it as a dream or a breakdown or trauma manifesting itself in hallucination. This was real, but it wasn't happening in the way real things do. It was deeper, older, intentional. One night, I followed the sound of footsteps to the basement. I had always avoided it, the one place that never changed, never creaked. It had remained still while the rest of the house danced. There were no lights down there, just a heavy, wet smell and the sound of trickling water. At the base of the stairs, I found another door. I had never seen it before. It was made of stone, set into a wall that should have led to dirt. Carved into the surface were 3 words. Do not knock. I turned around. At the top of the stairs, something was watching me. Not a shape, not a figure, just the pressure of presence. A negative space, the sense of a question being asked, silently. I backed away. I did not knock. Later that night, I woke to find dirt under my fingernails, and the mirror in the hallway cracked just slightly right across my reflection's throat. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I don't remember lying down or closing my eyes, but I remember the dream. If it was a dream, I was in the attic again. The mirror was uncovered this time. The linen lay pooled at its base, wet with rain, though the roof didn't leak. The mirror stood taller than me, and its glass wasn't glass. It was something darker, something that swallowed reflection. I approached, even though I didn't want to. The closer I got, the more I felt my memories thinning. Names, places, the soft outlines of childhood all loosening like threads from a frayed cloth. Only the house remained vivid. Only this moment, when I stood directly in front of it, I expected to see myself. Instead, I saw the house from the outside, like I was standing at the tree line, watching it through someone else's eyes. The windows were lit, but flickering. The front door was ajar. A figure stood in the entryway. It was me, but I looked older, weathered, slightly thinner, my eyes hollowed by years. I hadn't lived yet. That version of me stepped back and slowly closed the door. And when it shut, I woke up gasping, my throat raw with the taste of soil. After that, I stopped fighting it. I stopped measuring the hallways, stopped locking the doors, stopped pretending I could control the rhythm of a place that had already decided who I would become. I began exploring. The house changed more freely now. It no longer waited for night. Rooms melted into one another. Mirrors appeared on walls where none had been. The sound of whispering followed me, even when I turned corners quickly to catch it. Every now and then, I would catch glimpses of my other self in the reflections, in shadowy thresholds. She was always watching, waiting. On April 14th, I found the second photo album. It was on the fireplace mantel, beside the clock that had frozen at 3:17. This album was older, its cover a dull green, damp to the touch. Inside, I found more Polaroids. They weren't of the house this time. They were of me, in different rooms, at different ages. Some I recognized a childhood birthday I hadn't remembered until that moment. Others I didn't recognize at all. Moments I hadn't lived yet. One photo stood out. I was sitting in the attic, in front of the mirror, wearing clothes I didn't own. My expression was hollow, my eyes too wide. Scribbled beneath it, April 19, full return. I didn't leave the house. It's not that I didn't try. I opened the front door once and found only the hallway again, stretching out where the world used to be. I broke a window in the kitchen, but it showed no outside. Just more rooms, more walls, sometimes more versions of me. One of them screamed when she saw me. I never found her again. I began to understand the truth, slowly, like light returning to a dark room where the furniture has all been rearranged. The house didn't remember me because I lived here. I lived here because the house remembered me. It called me back. Or maybe it never let me leave at all. Maybe Chicago, the apartment, the lost job, maybe that was the illusion. This was the center. This was the origin. One night, I returned to the basement. The stone door was open. Inside, the air was warm and wet and pulsed like the inside of a mouth. The walls were soft, breathing. The floor sloped gently downward into a larger space, round and dark, lit only by the soft glow of mirrors embedded in the walls. Each mirror showed me something different. Me as a child, lost in the woods behind the house. Me as a teenager, watching Aunt Lillian stare too long into her own reflection. Me in the attic, draped in linen like the mirror had once been. They weren't memories. They were possibilities. Lives stacked against one another like cards waiting to be dealt. And then, at the center of the room, I saw it. It wasn't a creature, not in the way you'd imagine. It was a shape, an absence, a cut in the air that throbbed with awareness. It didn't speak, but it pressed a feeling into my mind like a thumb against glass. You were built for this, and I understood. I wasn't a visitor. I was a vessel. The house wasn't haunted. It was the haunting, a construct of thought and echo, memory and mimicry feeding on those who return, those it selects, those it shaped to fit. The house didn't change to trap me. It changed me to fit within it. I was becoming its reflection. After that night, the mirrors all broke, except the one in the attic. It showed only darkness now, but if I looked long enough, I could see the suggestion of movement, something pacing, waiting. I didn't dream anymore. I stopped eating. I stopped checking the date, because I knew what April 19th meant. On the morning of April 19th, I awoke in the attic. I hadn't gone there. I hadn't meant to. But I was there all the same, seated before the mirror, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. And for the first time, the mirror showed me as I was not warped or lagging, not twisted or smiling. Just me. Then I blinked, and my reflection stayed perfectly still. I sat in the attic for a long time. It might have been hours. It might have been seconds. The attic no longer obeyed time, and neither did I. The mirror reflected me, but not perfectly. The image was still just off enough to make me feel like a guest in my own skin. My movements were mirrored with a hint of lag, the same half-second I'd seen before. But now, I wasn't sure which one of us was real. The floor beneath me felt warm, alive. The house was no longer hiding its nature. The walls pulsed. The air buzzed faintly, like something humming from deep underground. Rain tapped the roof in irregular patterns, a broken rhythm, like coded messages in water. I said nothing. I simply stared. I don't know how many days passed after that. I stopped marking them. The chalk kept disappearing. Anyway, the house settled into a loop. Certain things would repeat. The hallway growing longer, the same knock at the door at 3:17, the same reflection smiling when I didn't. But there were new patterns, two little additions, that let me know the process was still continuing. One day, I found a Polaroid pinned to the underside of my pillow. It was me, again, but I was smiling this time, genuinely, or at least convincingly. Written at the bottom in sharp black ink, acceptance. I began to change in ways I couldn't describe. I could hear the house thinking not in words, but in impulses. It would guide me toward certain rooms, certain pages in certain books. It would tilt the hallway just slightly so that I'd end up outside the mirror room again. I stopped resisting, and in return, it showed me things. I began remembering events I had never lived. I stood in the backyard with Lillian in 1962, watching the trees lean toward the porch. I held a candle in the basement in 1894, whispering something to a wall that breathed. I looked into the mirror as a child, then again as a mother, then again as something older. The house wasn't a place. It was all places it had ever been, layered over one another like sheets of glass. And I was becoming another layer, another witness, another function. One morning, I woke to find someone standing in the front yard. It was a girl, maybe 9 or 10, holding a suitcase. She stared up at the house with uncertainty, her shoulders hunched against the rain. I knew she couldn't see me from the attic, but I stepped back from the window anyway. The house took a deep breath, and I realized this was how it began. Not just for me, for all of us. She wouldn't remember how she got here. She wouldn't leave. Not really. Later that night, I saw her reflection in the mirror outside my room. She passed quickly, her image faint just enough to tell me the process had started. I wanted to warn her, leave a note like someone had left for me. Don't follow it. But I didn't, because I understood now. The note wasn't left to stop the change. It was part of it. Just one more repetition in the house's slow, patient rhythm. Eventually, I stopped seeing my own reflection. The mirrors went dark for me. But sometimes, if I stood still long enough, I'd see others. People wandering through different versions of the house, frightened, confused, whispering names I didn't know. Sometimes I would try to speak to them. My voice would echo without sound. My lips would move in slow, stuttering loops. Their eyes would widen in recognition, and then they'd vanish, pulled back into their lair. Their turn. Today, I woke up in the entryway. The house is quiet. The rain hasn't come in days. I think I've finally become whatever it wanted me to be. Not a resident. Not even a ghost. Something else. A presence. A shape in the reflection that lingers just a bit too long. If you ever find yourself driving through a forgotten town, and you see a crooked house at the end of a long, narrow path, don't stop. Don't go inside. But if you do, if you knock and the door opens, just know that someone will be watching from the top of the stairs. And she used to be like you. It started with the hum. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling. A pressure behind the ears. A kind of presence in the air. If you've ever been in a tunnel at night, alone, long after the last train has passed, you might know what I mean. That's where I was. The old Suthridge Tunnel, Maintenance Station 17. I took the job because I needed something quiet. After the divorce, after my mother passed, after the apartment turned into 4 blank walls that echoed too much, I wanted somewhere I could disappear, somewhere that didn't ask for anything but presence. I found the listing online. Night operator, it said. Overnight post. Minimal duties. Ideal for self-directed individuals. Must tolerate extended solitude. Perfect. I didn't care that it paid poorly. I didn't care that the last operator hadn't filled out their exit paperwork. I just wanted to vanish without dying. The Suthridge Tunnel system is mostly decommissioned now, built in the late 1930s. It had a reputation even back then for bad luck cave-ins, faulty wiring, unexplained failures. Most of the lines were shut down after the city updated its transit routes, but a few stretches remain active for maintenance and archival records. My station was one of the holdouts, an old relay and monitoring outpost buried 3 stories beneath street level, at the midpoint of a disused tunnel line. From the surface, it's nothing but a squat brick building behind a rusted fence. No sign, no windows, just a keypad and a service elevator that winds all the way down. The station itself was clean but aged walls of dull concrete and faded signage, floors that smelled faintly of dust and oil. It had a control booth, a cot, a kitchen area, and a long sealed-off hallway that led into the dark spine of the tunnel itself. My job was simple. Sit in the booth, check the meters, listen for anomalies on the audio feed, and log anything strange. They didn't expect much. They didn't explain much, either. The first few nights were peaceful. I arrived just before dusk and left at sunrise. The elevator worked on an old timer and wouldn't open again until 1 a.m., which meant no early exits. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, a book, sometimes my sketch pad. The tunnel was always quiet. I'd sit in the booth, the only light coming from the dull overheads and the green glow interface panels. Occasionally, I'd hear static on the old comms line or the faint metallic ping of the tunnel settling. But that was it. Stillness. And for a while, that was enough. I started to feel like myself again, or at least someone quieter, someone unburdened. It was the fourth night when I noticed the hum. At first, I thought it was the equipment, the panel in the corner that never quite shut off, the low groan of power bleeding from somewhere deep in the walls. But this was different. It didn't come from the machines. It came from the air, low, just under the threshold of hearing, like something old vibrating through the stone. I mentioned it in the logbook, briefly. Low, frequency tone noted at 3:12 a.m. Non-electrical. Will monitor. The next night, it started earlier. By the end of my first week, I could feel the hum before I could hear it, like a shiver in the spine of the place, a tension, as if the tunnel itself was listening. It never felt threatening. Not then, just curious. I called HQ on my 7th shift to ask about the audio lines, if there was any chance they were picking up ambient frequencies from above or adjacent tunnels. There was a long pause. Then the woman on the other end, I think her name was Jules, said, 17? Huh, that one shouldn't be wired in anymore. I asked what she meant. She said, I'll check. Probably just old tech acting up. If it's just a hum, it's harmless. Don't stress about it. I didn't push. That was the last time I spoke to anyone from the surface. It rained the next few nights. I liked that. Rain made the silence feel less hollow. The drops would echo faintly down the stairwell shaft above the elevator, a soft tick-tick-tick like fingers on glass. I would sit in the booth with the lights dimmed, sipping cold coffee, watching the screen cycle between static and tunnel views. Nothing ever moved, but I began to notice gaps. Not in the tunnel, but in the recording. The camera feed would blink. A second here, 3 seconds there. Always around the same time, 2:42 a.m. One night, it skipped nearly a full minute. When the feed resumed, I thought I saw something at the edge of the screen. A shadow near the far wall of the tunnel. Tall, narrow, still. I blinked, rewound the feed. It was gone. That night, I dreamed of the tunnel but longer. It stretched endlessly, and I was walking down the center of it, barefoot, the hum vibrating through my ribs. There were no lights, no sound, just breath. The hum began earlier now. Instead of creeping in just after 2 or 3 in the morning, I could feel it the moment the elevator touched down at the start of my shift. It sat behind everything, the lights, the equipment, my thoughts. It wasn't noise. Not really. It was presence. I told myself it was nothing, that a week underground could make anyone start projecting meaning into background static, that the mind craves patterns, even where none exist. I kept the lights bright. I brought music instrumental only. to stay alert. I drank more coffee, but none of it helped. By the 10th night, I stopped pretending it wasn't real. The hallway door, sealed at the end of the operator's station, began to sweat. That's the only word I have for it. Condensation gathered around the edges, not from heat, but from something else. The air near it turned cooler than the rest of the station, tinged with a smell I couldn't quite place. Damp iron, moss, copper wiring, half rotted. I checked the logs, the paper ones from the operator before me. Most of the entries were mundane: equipment inspections, cleaning rotations, circuit mapping. But toward the end, the handwriting changed, became frantic. Fewer words, more symbols. One line kept repeating, "The tone wants attention." The flicker in the tunnel camera increased. Some nights, it would vanish entirely between 2:40, 2, and 3:1. The monitor would flash to gray static, then return to the same empty tunnel, untouched. But once, just once, the feed didn't come back. Instead, the screen turned black. Not off, just black. I pressed every key, rebooted the station software, even kicked the panel once. It came back on its own at 3:17. The tunnel was empty, but the microphone was live. I heard breathing. I made a mistake on my 12th night. I opened the hallway door, not because of bravery, because of boredom. I told myself I wanted to log the damage, maybe find a junction box to fix the hum, something stupid and plausible. But when I unlatched the bolts and pulled the door wide, what I found wasn't more station. It was dark, so much darker than it should have been. The hallway stretched about 30 feet, then ended at a pressure-sealed bulkhead. That wasn't unusual. What was strange was the smell, stronger now, like wet stone and burned air, and the sense that I was being watched from just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The air didn't feel like air anymore. It felt thick, like liquid held in place by memory. I shut the door. The next morning, I found the lock reset. I didn't do that. The only way to engage the bolt was from the inside. I started sleeping during the day with the booth door wedged shut, a pipe tucked beneath my cot. Not because I thought it would help, just because it felt like something a person should do. The dreams returned. Always the tunnel. Always me, walking. But now there were whispers. Soft ones, rising beneath the hum. I couldn't make out words, but they were close, intimate, like someone leaning in just behind your ear, saying your name with their mouth closed. I started hearing them while I was awake. The lights dimmed unpredictably now, flickered even when the generator was full. Sometimes they would pulse in perfect time with the hum, like the place had developed a heartbeat. I wrote it down. Everything I could. Night 13, 2:40, 1:00. Smell of rust and ammonia. Lights dimmed to 60%. Tone constant. Cold patch by Locker B. Heard movement. Night 13, 3:00 a.m. Tone shifted pitch. 3 descending notes. Then silence. Then breath. Not mine. Night 14, 2:43 a. Tunnel camera offline. When it returned, I saw myself standing in the hallway, but I was in the booth. I tried calling HQ again. The signal didn't connect. The line picked up once, but all I heard was static and something faint underneath. A voice? A laugh? It sounded like my ex-wife. I hung up before it could say anything else. The cot began shifting position. Small changes an inch to the left. The pillow flipped. The blanket folded differently than I left it. Once, I came back from the bathroom and found the light on above it. I never used that light. Another time, the microphone recorder was running. Playback revealed nothing but the low hum and a second voice layered beneath mine, repeating the log entries. The station was remapping itself. I could feel it. The bathroom tiles changed pattern. The kitchen clock ran backward, but only between 2, 0 and 3, 17. The stairs echoed twice for every step. Something behind the place beneath it was opening a shape I didn't know how to describe. I drew it once, half asleep, just a tangle of curves and angles. But when I looked at it the next day, it hurt to see. It wasn't a symbol. It was a place, and I was inside it. The final line in the old operator's log was barely legible, scratched deep into the page. The voice is not from the other side. It is from below. One. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because the cot was already occupied when I entered the booth. Just a shape under the blanket. I didn't lift it. I didn't move. I just sat on the floor, across the room, and waited until morning. When the elevator opened at 6:01, the booth was empty. The blanket was folded, and the hum had stopped. I didn't go home that day. Not really. I surfaced. Yes. I took the elevator up. I stepped into the gray light of early morning, blinking like something that had lived underground too long. But home didn't feel real anymore. I made it as far as my apartment door before I stopped. I didn't unlock it. I stood there with the key in my hand, feeling the weight of something still clinging to me, like damp clothing that wouldn't dry, like static that wouldn't discharge. I didn't sleep. That night, I went back down. The tunnel hum didn't return right away, but the absence of it was worse. The silence felt surgical, too exact, like a vacuum had been pulled in the walls. The kind of silence that waits for you to speak first, so it knows how to answer. I didn't log anything that night. I sat in the booth, lights off, watching the tunnel feed, waiting for the flicker. It came at 2:41 sharp. This time, there was no static, just a seamless cut to black, and then a figure stepped into frame. It looked like me, but not completely. The walk was wrong, the proportions just slightly off, longer arms, a tilt to the head that felt unfinished. It stopped in the center of the frame, stared into the camera, and stood still for almost a full minute. Then the screen went black again. When the image returned, the tunnel was empty, but the microphone remained active. And this time, the voice wasn't mine. It whispered a series of numbers, slowly, carefully, as if reciting coordinates. Then a phrase, slurred and distorted. Come below. Come to where the tunnel ends. I tried to pull the feed to download the file, but the system froze. When it restarted, the recording was gone. No trace. The logbook was empty too. Pages torn out. Ink smeared. My handwriting altered. Like someone mimicked it, but with the wrong hand. One entry had been left behind. I walked in alone. I walked out twice. That night, I heard footsteps in the sealed hallway. Deliberate, slow, one step every 5 seconds. I watched the bolt on the hallway door twitch. Not unlock, just twitch, like something testing the boundaries from the other side. I didn't breathe. Eventually, the steps stopped, but the pressure in the air stayed behind. By my 20th night, I began forgetting things. Not small things, not keys or numbers. I forgot my mother's face. I forgot the name of the town I grew up in. I forgot what sunlight actually felt like. Not just the warmth, the shape of it, the color. When I looked in the mirror, I still saw myself, but it was the self that walked differently. The one I had seen in the tunnel. I started talking to myself during shifts. At least, I thought I was, until the booth mic picked up something responding. My own voice, or a perfect copy of it, repeating my words with slight delay. But sometimes, it changed the ending. Slight substitutions. I'd say, "I'm still here," and the echo would reply, "We're still here." One night, the door to the tunnel hallway stood wide open when I arrived. No bolt, no sign of damage, just open. The air that spilled out was dense and warm, and beneath the smell of stone and rust, there was something like breath, wet and slow. A sound, too, not humming this time, singing. A low, wordless melody, moving up and down in 3 long notes. Familiar, lullaby, slow. I stepped inside. The hallway stretched longer now, far longer. I passed familiar signs, locker B, the emergency cabinet, the old rusted valve on the wall, but they were spaced wrong, too far apart. The hallway had no end in sight. I walked for 10 minutes, 15. Eventually, the floor began to slant downward. The air thickened, grew warmer. The lights above flickered, then turned red, then off completely. Only the glow from the emergency strip along the floor remained. I kept going. At the bottom of the slope, I found another door. Steel, sealed, marked with 3 things. A handprint, a circle with no center, and the word "Listen." I placed my hand against it, not out of bravery, out of obedience. The door sighed open. The space beyond was vast, larger than the tunnel could contain. A cavern, concrete and ribbed metal with machines pulsing faintly along the walls. And in the center, something tall and still. A tower of glass and wires, humming in patterns that throbbed beneath the skin. Inside that tower, floating in some kind of liquid, were shapes, people, or things that used to be people. Their faces half-formed, mouths slightly open, each one wearing the same uniform I wore, each with my name tag. Some opened their eyes as I passed. Some whispered, all in my voice. Then I saw the console. Simple, outdated, just a microphone. and a red light blinking steadily beside it. A single phrase printed on the plaque above: "Begin transmission." I reached out. I don't know why. Maybe it was the hum, or the way the room shifted around my breath, or the warmth in the microphone that pulsed like a heartbeat. I pressed the button, and from every corner of the station, the booths, the speakers, the comm lines, came my voice, telling the next one how to descend. I didn't remember returning to the booth. One moment I stood at the console, hearing my voice loop out into the cavern. The next, I was back in the operator's chair, the tunnel feed static blind, and the hallway door sealed once again. The only proof I had that I'd gone down there was the hum. It was louder now, clearer, structured. It didn't just drone anymore, it pulsed in measured patterns, like breathing and numbers combined, Morse code by way of lungs. Every so often, I'd catch a rhythm that sounded like words without syllables, thoughts too old for a human mouth to shape. The red light on the booth's mic was permanently on. Even when I unplugged it, I tried to quit. I typed my resignation on the old computer. When I clicked send, the screen didn't respond. Just a flicker. Then a phrase appeared, already processed. I hadn't sent it, but it was right. Somewhere in the booth drawer, I found a resignation letter, typed, dated, signed in my handwriting, but the date was 5 days from now. The station already knew. At 3:17 a.m. that night, the feed came online early. No flicker, no blackout, just the tunnel, empty, save for a distant figure far down the line. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It simply stood there, too far for me to make out a face, but I knew what it was. I knew what it would become. I zoomed in, frame by frame. The silhouette was just wrong, like someone trying to recall a body from memory and missing a few key details. The hands bent backwards. The chest rose and fell in reverse. And behind it, the tunnel warped like a mirage, pulsing in and out of focus. The camera feed cut again. When it returned, the booth door behind me had opened. No one was there, but the air had changed. Heavier, warmer, and wet. The walls shimmered slightly, as if condensation formed from breath instead of temperature. On the booth desk sat a fresh logbook. Its pages were empty. The first line waited for me. Date, operator name, shift start time. I didn't remember writing them, but the pen was in my hand. The dreams no longer came, only at night. I saw things while awake now, flickers of movement at the edge of the hallway, reflections in screens that stayed too long, voices that said nothing but sounded like people I'd loved. They would visit me sometimes as silhouettes, sometimes as memories walking like puppets. My mother would stand just outside the booth glass, mouthing something I couldn't hear. My ex-wife would hum the same 3 descending notes. Each time I blinked, they vanished. Each time I looked in the tunnel feed, they stood closer. One night, I heard a knock. 3 slow taps on the booth door. I didn't answer, but the mic went live anyway. From it came my voice, not an echo, but a memory. One I'd never lived. It whispered. The first voice was never human. It only learned from those who listened too long. I unplugged the mic. It kept talking. Eventually, I began understanding the patterns in the hum. Not just sounds, but instructions. Signals. The tunnel wasn't for transit. It never had been. It was a throat. The station was a mouthpiece. And the operator was a translator. We speak what we're told, not in words, but in presence, in repetition, in being observed by something that can only shape itself through mirrored flesh. That was the job, not to listen, to become the voice it needed to speak. I returned to the lower level, not out of curiosity, out of compulsion. The console was waiting, but this time it was different. The tank of glass in the center of the room was filled with a single occupant now. Me, or what I would become. Its eyes were closed. Its skin was transparent, shot through with lines of light. Its face still formed unfinished, waiting for memory to complete the sculpture. I stepped up to the microphone. I didn't press the button. I didn't need to. It began on its own, and I began to speak. Words I didn't choose, thoughts I didn't form, but they came in my voice, and in doing so, became mine. Not commands, not threats, just an invitation to whoever might be listening on the other side of silence. Shift begins at dusk. The booth is clean. The hallway is quiet. The tunnel waits. I don't know how many nights have passed. The clock above the control booth ticks, but it loops. I've watched it strike 3, 17 at least 7 times in a single night. Then 2, 42, then back again. The hum has changed. It's no longer a backdrop. It's a language, and I understand it now. Not in the way you understand a sentence, but in the way you understand music or the pressure in your lungs before a storm. The tunnel is speaking, has always been speaking, and I am no longer just hearing it. I am answering. There's no distinction between shifts anymore. No surface. No sky. I live in the station, if you can call it that. I no longer feel tired or hungry or cold. The concept of time off has dissolved. I suspect it was never real to begin with. The booth remains. The hallway remains. The voice remains. But me? I'm not so sure. Sometimes the microphone activates on its own. Sometimes it records even when I'm not speaking. I'll listen back to the tapes, only to hear words I've never said, sometimes in my voice, sometimes in others. Familiar voices. One was my old physics professor, speaking about resonance. Another was my father, reciting a poem I'd forgotten. One recording was just silence, but it made me cry for 2 hours straight. I don't know what that one said, but I understood it. A few days ago, I think the elevator came down. That hasn't happened in a long time. It groaned open at 1 a.m., just like it used to, but no one stepped out. Still, someone had ridden it. The floor was wet, and there were prints on the booth glass, not fingerprints, but face prints, as if someone had pressed their head to the window and stayed there for hours, listening. They were exactly the shape of my own face, but older. I opened the locker the old operator left behind. I'd avoided it all this time, but now it felt right. Inside was another logbook. Every page was filled. Each entry was a shift summary, but they all ended the same way, a phrase written in tighter and tighter script until the final page. If you hear yourself calling, don't answer. You've already said yes. The handwriting matched mine perfectly. I returned to the lower level one final time. The tank was gone. The console dark. But in the center of the room stood a chair high-backed, riveted to the floor, with wires coiled like veins into the ceiling above. A single headset sat on the seat, waiting. The kind dispatchers wear. It was warm when I picked it up. No screen, no monitor, just the headset and a switch. When I flipped the switch, there was no sound, just an overwhelming knowing, like being on the other end of a long-distance call that never ends. I saw things then, not with my eyes, with the place behind them. Tunnels stretching out forever, under every city, beneath every lake, through every desert, all connected, all humming, and in each one, a booth, and in each booth, a voice, and in each voice, a memory that was not their own. I took my place. The chair fits me now. It knows the curve of my back. It knows the rhythm of my breath. Every night, someone new comes down in the elevator. They don't see me. Not yet. But I whisper to them. Through the hum, through the mic, through the pauses in the lights, and the flicker in the feed. I say, the shift begins at dusk. The hallway is quiet. The tunnel waits. And they always answer, even if they don't mean to. If you're listening to this, if you're hearing the words and feeling the hum behind them, it means the booth is empty again. It means you've heard the call. It means it's your turn. I had nowhere else to go when I found the Rain House. That's not its name, of course. The town called it the Bellman House, after the original owners, a family of farmers who vanished sometime in the 1930s. But I didn't know any of that when I arrived. I just knew that it rained there every single day. I found the house on an online listing buried deep in a forum about rural properties. A photo, one paragraph of text, no contact name. It read, "Quiet farmhouse on 11 acres, good bones, secluded, rainfall year-round, price negotiable, must visit in person, cash only." It sounded like a joke, but I had just burned through the last of my options. My savings were nearly gone. My apartment lease had ended, and my therapist had gently suggested that geographic change might be helpful, which was a nice way of saying I was becoming a ghost in my own life. So I packed what I had left into my car, followed the pin drop on the listing, and drove until the roads turned to gravel and the sky turned to rain. The town wasn't much, just a few streets clinging to each other like they were afraid of blowing away. The kind of place where the stores don't need signs, and the locals all speak like they're remembering something sad. I stopped for gas and asked the attendant if he knew the Bellman House. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Don't go during a thunderstorm," he said. "It's always raining," I replied. He didn't say anything else. The house sat at the end of a long dirt path, overgrown with wild ferns and tangled ivy. It was 2 stories, narrow and pale, with a slanted roof and wide porch sagging from disuse. I stepped out of the car and into the rain, warm, constant, not heavy but relentless. It soaked the cuffs of my jeans within seconds. The front door creaked when I opened it, not from disrepair, from something else, like it didn't want to be opened quickly. The air inside was still, dry, which didn't make sense. The windows were shut, the walls clean, no mold, no rot, no scent of dampness, despite the steady drum of rain on the roof. It smelled like dust and linen, like a house that hadn't been lived in for years, but had been waiting for someone to. There was furniture old but intact, a sofa covered in a sheet, a wooden dining table with 5 mismatched chairs, a radio on a sideboard that looked like it hadn't been plugged in since the Reagan years. And upstairs, a row of bedrooms, each with a made bed and a window looking out into endless gray mist. I slept that night without dreams. The rain never stopped. Over the next few days, I settled in. There was no electricity, but the water still ran, cold but clear. I brought groceries in from town and lit candles in each room. I started a routine. Wake up, listen to the rain, walk the perimeter, make tea, sit in silence. It was exactly what I thought I needed. The quiet here wasn't just peaceful, it was thick, like something tangible in the air. No cars, no planes, no neighbors, just rain on the windows and the low groan of the wind against the siding. I could feel something in me relaxing, surrendering, like my bones had been clenched for years and were finally learning how to be still again. The strange thing was the rain. It didn't behave normally. It fell in sheets, sometimes diagonally, upward, in spirals, and yet nothing ever flooded. The earth stayed soft, not soggy. The house never leaked, and there were no puddles. No matter how much it rained, the ground drank every drop. I wrote it off as luck, as soil composition, as climate I didn't understand. But late one night, while walking past the hallway window, I saw the strangest thing. The rain was falling, only on this property. Beyond the fence line, just at the edge of the woods, the trees stood dry. No mist, no shimmer, not even wet bark. It was as if the rain had been confined, drawn inward, like a circle of weather penned in by something unseen. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I found a note, folded neatly on the kitchen counter. It was written in pencil, on thick yellow paper. The handwriting was slanted and even. Do not listen to the voices in the rain. They are not yours. There was no name, no indication of who left it. The doors were locked. I had been alone all night. I read the note 3 times before burning it in the stove. Then I sat in silence and listened. For a long time, there was nothing, just the hiss of rain on the roof. Then, barely audible, I thought I heard it. A voice, not loud, not clear, like someone whispering from far across a field, calling a name that wasn't mine, but that I felt in my chest. I didn't move, didn't answer. I just closed my eyes and waited for it to pass. It did, but not completely. The rain never changed. It didn't lighten, didn't grow heavier. It simply was a steady, rhythmic tapping on the windows, like fingers drumming softly in a pattern I couldn't quite follow. It should have been comforting. But after that first note, after hearing that voice, if I even heard it, something shifted in the silence. It was no longer empty. It was watching. I started noticing things around the house. Small things, easy to explain if I wanted to. A cup left on the wrong counter. A drawer half open that I was sure I had shut. The smell of something faintly sweet in the hallway clover, maybe, or honeysuckle, even though there was nothing in bloom outside. One morning I woke up and the front door was unlocked. I told myself I forgot. I told myself a dozen little lies, and every one of them was almost true. Almost. The rain made sound behave strangely. It carried voices through the house in odd ways. I would be upstairs and swear I heard someone speaking just below me, even though I was alone. I would walk into the kitchen and catch the tail end of a sentence vanishing into silence. Sometimes I thought I heard my own voice not echoing, but repeating, trying different words, like it was practicing. The windows were the worst. The longer I stayed, the less they reflected properly. It began with angles. I'd walk past and catch a glimpse of the room from a perspective that didn't match. The table too far to the left, the hallway stretching longer. Once, I saw a light on upstairs, while every light in the house was off. Another time, I saw myself standing perfectly still at the foot of the stairs. But I was in the kitchen. I closed the curtains after that. I didn't open them again. On the 7th morning, I found something outside the front door. A stone, flat, wet, carved with a simple symbol, a circle, broken at the bottom. I left it there. I didn't touch it. Later that day, I walked the perimeter of the house again, out past the overgrown path and toward the tree line where the rain still ended abruptly, as if hitting glass. At the base of one tree, I found another stone. Same symbol, same shape, but this one was warm. I didn't stay long. That night, the voice came again, clearer, still faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice, calm, low, careful, speaking from just outside my bedroom window. The rain should have drowned her out, but it didn't. I heard every word. Let us in. Not a demand, a suggestion. I stayed in bed, eyes open, every muscle locked. Eventually, the voice stopped, but I could still hear breath on the glass. I began to dream, always of rain. Sometimes I was standing in the middle of the woods beyond the fence, barefoot, arms at my side, watching something rise out of the soil. Other times I was inside the house, but it was wrong. All the windows open, the rain pouring in, the walls breathing like lungs soaked in mist. Once, I dreamed of the staircase swallowing itself, each step folding upward, like a mouth shutting slowly. And always, in the background, the voice whispered, not at me, to me, like it already knew I would listen. I tried to leave. On the 10th day, I packed a small bag and walked out to the car. The keys didn't work. I tried the ignition, the door, even the trunk. The battery was fine. The engine made noise, but the car wouldn't move, as if the tires were locked to the ground, as if the road back had unraveled behind me. When I stepped out, I noticed something else. There were no tire tracks, no sign the car had ever arrived. I stayed inside after that. Didn't go near the windows. Didn't open the door. But the house grew less patient. I would wake to find things rearranged, furniture turned, blankets folded in unfamiliar ways, the silverware drawer completely empty, then full again the next night, but with pieces I didn't recognize. And the note returned. Same paper, same pencil, different words. Don't trust the version of yourself that speaks. I started keeping a mirror by the bed, not out of vanity, out of fear. I needed to see myself, to know I was still the one inside this body. But the mirror betrayed me, too. First, it lagged my movements half a beat behind. Then, one night, I sat still and watched it move without me. Just my head, turning, looking toward the window, smiling. That night, I locked the bedroom door and pushed the dresser in front of it. I didn't sleep. I listened to the rain, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't random. It was a pattern. It was speaking. It had always been speaking. The next morning, the dresser had moved. Not far, just a few inches away from the door, but enough that I noticed. Enough that I knew I hadn't done it. I hadn't slept. I hadn't gotten up. I'd stayed curled beneath the blankets, watching the mirror for hours until the candle burned out. Still, the dresser had moved. The lock was undone, and on the floor, just beneath the window, was another stone. This one wasn't carved. It was split, cracked open like a seed pod. Inside was something black and soft, glistening faintly. I didn't touch it. I wrapped it in a towel and threw it outside into the rain. When I checked an hour later, it was gone. The notes came more often now, folded neatly, placed with care, each written in the same hand, on the same paper, always appearing where I wasn't looking, on the bathroom sink, inside the fridge, under the pillow. Some were simple. Don't speak your name out loud. Stay out of the third bedroom. Others were stranger. You are not the first. It remembers you better than you remember yourself. One note simply read, "She is listening through your voice." The voice outside grew more persistent. It came at different hours, not just at night. Sometimes I would hear it from the basement, where I hadn't dared go. Sometimes from the vents. It didn't shout. It never sounded angry. It invited, always calmly, always like a mother calling her child in from play. "Come outside. Let us in. A better version of you is waiting." But the worst was the whisper from inside the house. One evening, while lighting candles, I heard it behind me in the same calm, even tone. "You've already opened the door." I began to question my memory. Things didn't stay where I left them. Journals rewrote themselves in my handwriting. Time felt loose, hours folded together. Nights passed without notice. I would look up and find the rain falling sideways against the windows, as if gravity had given up. The hallway stretched longer at night. I started counting steps. From the front room to the back stairs, it was 12 paces in daylight. At night, it was 17. One night, it was 24. With a door at the end I'd never seen before. I didn't open it, but I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of someone breathing on the other side perfectly in sync with mine. The rain stopped once, just once. It happened at 3:13 a.m. The house went silent, utterly, unnaturally silent. No patter, no hiss. Even the air stilled, not calm, but suspended, like the breath of a room before it screams. I stood in the living room, candle in hand, waiting. I felt watched, not from outside, from above. And then, just as suddenly, the rain returned not in drops, but in a single wave, slamming against every window at once like a giant fist. The walls shuddered, and I heard my own voice scream from upstairs, but I hadn't opened my mouth. I began recording myself. Audio, mostly. Sometimes video. I wanted proof. Something to show I was still me. That I was the one inside the skin. On the fourth recording, I heard something strange. Around the 3-hour mark, as I slept restlessly, there was a sound, faint, wet, rhythmic, dripping, and then, layered beneath it, came whispering. Familiar, wrong. It was my voice, mumbling things I couldn't understand, backwards, overlapping, speaking over itself in a slow growing tide. Then silence. Then, clearly, the you that sleeps is not the you that wakes. I stopped sleeping after that. I lit candles in every room. I stayed moving, but the house changed. The wallpaper began peeling in the shape of hands. The floorboards softened, like they'd been soaked through, even though the roof never leaked. The air turned thick with a floral scent, sweet, overpowering, cloying like lilies left too long in stagnant water. I began seeing her, in reflections, in doorways, in photographs I hadn't taken. She looked like me, almost, but her eyes were too dark, her smile too wide, her movement slightly lagged. Once, I saw her walking the hallway toward me. I blinked. She was gone. But when I checked the mirror behind me, she hadn't moved. I tried the basement. I don't know why. Maybe I thought the truth was down there. Or maybe the house wanted me to. The door opened on its own. The steps were stone, cold, wet, older than the rest of the house. I descended slowly. At the bottom was a single light bulb, flickering above a shallow pool of water. And in that pool, something stood. Not a figure, a shape. Long-limbed, head tilted, hands open, like waiting to be held. It didn't move, but I felt it watching. And as I stared into the water, I realized I wasn't seeing my reflection. I was seeing its memory of me. That night, I found the final note, slipped under the pillow, resting on my chest as I woke. No pencil this time, burned into the paper. It rains because you stayed. I spent the next day in silence, not by choice. My voice was gone. I opened my mouth to speak, to read, to hum, even just to breathe out loud, and nothing came. No sound, not even air. My lungs worked, my throat moved, but the world around me swallowed every vibration before it could form. The house had taken my voice, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that I could still hear it, my voice speaking without me, from other rooms, from behind doors I hadn't opened, from inside the mirror. Sometimes it sounded calm, other times not. I tried to write, but my hand trembled too much. I tried to leave, but the doors were gone. Not locked, not jammed. Gone. Where the front door once stood, there was only a blank wall, seamless, painted as if it had never existed. The windows were sealed, too, not boarded sealed. Like the house had decided it was done pretending to be a house. The rain still fell, but now it came from inside. It beaded down the wallpaper, ran in slow streams along the ceiling. It dripped from light fixtures that hadn't worked in weeks. It pooled at the corners of each room, but never spread. It just sat there, watching, waiting, like eyes. That night, I followed the sound of my own voice into the third bedroom, the one the note had warned me about. I had avoided it all this time. It stayed shut. Nothing strange about the door, no creaking, no draft, but the air around it always felt wrong, like standing too close to a speaker just before feedback. Now, the door was open. I stepped inside. It was empty, except for a mirror. Tall, framed in black wood, no dust on the surface. I stood in front of it and stared. The room around me was the same. The bed, the window, my body. But my reflection was not. It moved a moment too late. It blinked wrong. It smiled. Then it lifted its hand. I didn't move, but it did. It wrote a word in the condensation on the glass. Welcome. That's when I understood. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a possession. This house didn't trap people. It absorbed them, mimicked them. Every echo I'd heard, every misplaced object, every note, every version of myself that smiled from a darkened screen or stood just out of reach in a reflection. They weren't hallucinations. They were the house, learning me, copying, perfecting. It needed time. It needed memory. It needed permission. And it had it. I'd stayed. I'd listened. In the attic, I found the final piece. The door was hidden behind old boxes, nailed shut with rusted iron. Inside, the space was wider than it should have been. A shallow dome, like the inside of a bell. Smooth walls, no insulation, no roofline, just stone, wet and glistening like a throat. In the center was a pool of still water, and above it, hanging from the ceiling by black roots like cords, was a body. Mine, not asleep, not dead, waiting. The same clothes, the same scar above my wrist, the same line at the corner of my mouth. It opened its eyes when I entered. It smiled, and the rain above us fell harder. I ran, not to escape, to remember. I ran through the house, up and down hallways that no longer connected the way they used to. Doors opened into different versions of the same room. The living room existed 3 times. One pristine, one rotted, one filled with fog. I saw myself in each, reading, crying, laughing at nothing. Each version older, each version quieter, until I came back to the front hallway, gasping for breath, soaked in warm rain that had begun falling from every ceiling. There was a mirror there, the first one, the only one that ever reflected me properly. Now, it was empty. No reflection, just the house, looking in. That night, the voice returned, But it wasn't outside. It wasn't whispering. It spoke from my throat. I didn't open my mouth, but the words came. We remember. We remake. We reign. And then silence. Not peace. The silence of a finished sentence. I don't remember what happened after that. Not clearly. There are fragments, memories that don't feel like mine. I'm sitting in the living room, humming a tune I don't know. I'm standing at the fence line, rain falling only behind me. I'm whispering through a bedroom wall to someone I can't see. I'm standing in a mirror, smiling, but I don't know who's looking back. I've stopped counting the days. Time here has softened, lost its corners. The clocks in the house no longer move, but I still hear their ticking. The rain hasn't paused in what feels like weeks, but sometimes I'll blink and find the ground dry, the sky clear through a window that doesn't exist anymore. And I don't know whose memory that is. Mine or the house's. I still live here. That much I know. But I also don't. There are other versions of me now. I see them in passing through the warped corners of mirrors, across the hallway just as I turn. One walks slower than I do. One cries every time it sees me. One just stands with its head tilted, like it's waiting for something I haven't said yet. Sometimes I see myself asleep in the third bedroom. Sometimes I wonder if that is the real me. And this walking, writing, remembering shell is just a reflection still trying to earn a name. The notes have stopped. I don't need them anymore. The house and I, we understand each other now. I know what it wants, what it is. It was never a structure, not a place. It's a memory engine, a mirror of rain. It pulls people in and writes their lives across its walls, room by room, voice by voice. It doesn't devour. It remembers, perfectly, endlessly, until we stop being people and become echoes of every word we spoke, every step we took, every dream we tried to outrun. I walked to the edge of the property yesterday. The rain ended at the fence line, just as it always had. I reached a hand through. It came back dry, but the skin was paler, thinner. I pressed my ear to the rain's edge and listened. There was a sound I hadn't noticed before beneath the patter, behind the breath. Footsteps, approaching. Last night, I stood in the kitchen and looked in the old warped window. I hadn't looked in weeks, maybe longer. I saw the house behind me, not in the window, in the reflection. The whole house, every hallway, every stairwell, rising in impossible angles behind me like a cathedral built from memory and rain. And me, small, still, quiet, standing at the center. And around me, all the versions of myself, watching, waiting, not trapped, not angry, just present. I still speak aloud sometimes, softly, without breath. I say things like, "It's okay now. I'm not afraid. I remember who I was." And the house listens, not because it's kind, but because that's what it does. If you ever find yourself driving through mist and endless pine, and you see a pale farmhouse at the end of a narrow road where the rain never ends, don't stop. But if you do, if you walk through the door and feel like the house knows you, it does. It's only waiting for you to say something. Because once it knows your voice, it can remember you, too, forever. I didn't expect the job to last more than a few weeks. It was the kind of position no one applies for. One of those strange holdovers in a forgotten system. Like when you hear about someone still being paid to maintain a lighthouse that hasn't guided a ship in 50 years. That's what this was. A decommissioned ranger station at the edge of the Black Ridge National Preserve, 2 hours from anything that resembles a town. A single cabin, a shortwave radio, and a weather-beaten sign at the edge of a trail that disappears into the fog. The listing called it Trail Observer, North Lookout Post 9. Minimal duties, modest stipend, temporary contract. Ideal for those needing quiet. That last part was what sold me. I had recently stepped away from what used to be my life. A job in environmental compliance that drained me dry. A relationship that had dissolved into silence. A city that buzzed with neon but never made me feel less alone. I didn't leave with drama. I just left. Sold most of what I had, packed the rest into the back of my old Subaru, and followed the coordinates I was given. The park office had been shuttered since before I arrived. My clearance badge was waiting in a lockbox with a folded map and a single note. Stay within radio range. Log every lantern that lights. Lantern? The trail, it turned out, was not for hikers. Not anymore. It had once been part of a larger backwoods rescue system. A string of hand-cranked signal lanterns installed decades ago for emergencies. Most of them were dead now. Just relics nailed to pine trunks and rotting posts. But a few, according to the map, were still functional. My job wasn't to fix them. It was to observe. If a lantern lit, I was to mark the time, location, and weather conditions in the logbook. Then I was to report it via the shortwave. That was it. No intervention. No response. Just the log. The cabin was older than I expected. Gray wood, sloped roof, the scent of mildew and wood smoke hanging in the air. Inside was a cot, a pot-bellied stove, a desk with the logbook, and a radio that crackled even when it wasn't on. No cell service. No power outlets. No mirrors. I didn't think much of that last part until later. The first 3 days were uneventful. I hiked the perimeter each morning, the path looping in a long, silent ring around the ridge. The forest was damp and hushed, full of old trees and heavier air. It rained on and off, gentle and unending. I passed 7 lanterns along the loop. Most were covered in moss, their bases splitting from age. None of them lit. None of them had even been touched, by the look of it. I logged the walk anyway. Each night, I sat by the stove and listened to the static on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't speak. I didn't even read. The silence was good. For a while. On the 4th night, just after midnight, I saw the light. A faint, amber glow flickering through the mist, down past the tree line at the edge of the cabin's clearing. I thought maybe it was a firefly at first, or a distant hiker's lamp. But as I stepped onto the porch, I realized what it was. One of the lanterns. Lit. The nearest one. Station Post 3. About 40 yards down the trail. It burned low and steady, like it had just been lit seconds before. I grabbed my coat and went out. The lantern was warm to the touch. Not hot, not mechanical, just freshly held, like it had been lit by human hands. But there were no prints in the mud, No footprints at all, aside from my own. Just a soft patch of flattened pine needles nearby, as if someone had knelt or waited. I checked my map, then my watch. 12:17 a.m. Fog. No wind. 48 degrees. I logged the sighting. Then I stood there, holding the logbook to my chest, listening. The woods were completely silent. No rain. No crickets. Not even whined through the trees. It felt like something had inhaled and was still waiting to exhale. I returned to the cabin, radioed it in. The static hissed, then a faint click. No voice, just acknowledgement, then silence again. The next morning, the lantern was dark, but the moss that had covered it before was gone, scraped clean, and beneath it, etched into the wood of the post, was a line I hadn't seen the day before. 4 words. Do not follow light. I tried to rationalize the carving. Maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the moss. Maybe I'd missed it the first night, the rain, the fog, the unfamiliarity of it all. It wouldn't have been hard, but the words were too clean. The wood underneath, too fresh. And when I ran my fingers across the letters, a splinter broke off in my skin. Fresh cut. No question. Someone had written it recently, and I was the only one here. I didn't report the message. I told myself it was a prank left years ago. A ghost of some backcountry ranger's inside joke. There were plenty of stories like that, urban legends, cabin warnings carved into trees, trail superstitions, but something about this one didn't sit right. The phrasing was too direct. Not "don't trust the lights" or "beware." Just a simple command. Do not follow. That night, I stayed inside. It rained again, heavier this time, steady against the roof like fingernails tapping glass. The wind came in low howls through the chimney, carrying the scent of wet pine and ash. I sat by the radio, fingers on the logbook. Nothing happened. No lights. No calls. No messages. Just static. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was happening just beyond my vision, just outside the reach of the lantern posts and my own understanding. In the morning, I found a second carving, this time at lantern post 6, deeper into the trail loop. It was nearly identical, same hand, same depth, but this one said, "Always lights, never shadow." I didn't understand it, but it felt like a rule, a piece of something larger, and it wasn't the last. Over the next few days, I found more. Each post, even ones that hadn't lit up, bore new carvings. Small, tucked near the base, sometimes hard to see until you were right up close. Keep to the path. Never mark the trees. Some lights are echoes. Some were crossed out, as if whoever wrote them had changed their mind. On the 7th day, I saw a light in the forest. Not on the path. Not on any marked post. It flickered between the trees about 30 feet off trail, low to the ground, pulsing steadily. It was a lantern. I was sure of it. The same amber glow, the same rhythm. But it didn't belong to any of the numbered posts. There was no trail leading to it. No footprints in the brush. Just that light swaying gently, as if held in a hand I couldn't see. I stood at the trail's edge and stared, then turned and walked away. That night, I dreamt of the forest. I was walking the loop in the dark. The lanterns ahead of me kept flickering to life, one after another, always just before I reached them. They lit the way forward. But the further I walked, the more wrong they felt. Too bright, too warm. The posts they hung from were different, not wood, but something softer, something that bent when the wind passed. And each light buzzed faintly, like something alive was trapped inside. When I reached the last one, it opened like an eye. I woke up gasping. I didn't hike the loop the next day. I stayed close to the cabin, chopped wood, tried to read. Let the radio play static just to hear something. It wasn't until late afternoon that I noticed the logbook. The most recent page, the one I'd written the week's entries on, had changed. My handwriting, but not my words. The times were wrong. The weather conditions, off. Entries I hadn't written appeared on the list. Post 4 lit at 2:17 a.m. No sound. Smelled burnt rope. Post 1 lit for exactly 37 seconds. Then out. And at the bottom, underlined twice, I followed one. I tore the page out, burned it in the stove. The next morning, it was back. I started hearing things around the cabin, scraping on the porch steps, a soft shuffle at the back wall near the woodpile. Breathing outside the window, not quick, not panicked, just slow and even, like someone standing still, waiting. I never saw anything when I looked, but the smell, something old, burnt leather, wet dirt, oil from a forgotten lantern. On the 9th night, a voice came over the radio. I was half asleep when it crackled through. Faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice. Calm, dry. Trail report, post 9. Confirmation required. Step off trail. Mark new path. Then static. Then silence. I didn't respond. I never heard her again. But the next morning, at the edge of the clearing, a new path had opened. Fresh earth, trees slightly bent, a path that hadn't been there the day before. No footprints, just that soft amber glow deeper in the woods, pulsing, calling. I didn't take the new path. Not at first. I stood at the edge of it that morning, staring at the dirt like it might shift under my feet, like it might decide whether I belonged on it. The trail was narrow, framed by crooked saplings and pine branches that seemed to lean just slightly toward the center, forming a kind of funnel. I couldn't see the lantern from here, but I could feel its pulse, like a second heartbeat in my chest. Back inside the cabin, I paced, checked the logbook, scanned old entries to remind myself who I was and what I'd written. I listened to the radio until the static blurred into white noise. But no matter what I did, the woods were too quiet. And when I glanced out the front window, the path was still there, as clean and untouched as when it first appeared. It hadn't faded. It hadn't washed away in the night's rain. It was waiting. That evening, just before dusk, I broke. I walked to the edge of the clearing, boots crunching against pine needles, coat zipped up tight though there was no wind. I told myself I'd go 10 steps in, just enough to see, to understand, to know whether this was real or just some breakdown of loneliness, isolation, too much static in the mind. 10 steps. That was the promise. On the 11th step, I heard someone whisper my name. The sound came from ahead, just beyond a crooked bend in the new trail. A voice mine, not exact, but close enough to freeze me mid-step. It didn't echo. It didn't rise. Just a quiet statement. There you are. I turned around and walked back the way I came. Or tried to, because the trail behind me had changed. It wasn't gone, not completely, but the trees had shifted, grown thicker, leaned closer. The space between them narrower than before. The light was wrong, too. Dusk had come, but the shadows were stretching the wrong direction away from the cabin. I took a breath and kept walking. And finally, after what felt like too long, I emerged back into the clearing. But the cabin looked different, smaller, grayer, as though I'd returned to a version that had aged without me. I spent that night locked inside. The rain didn't come. The air hung in silence, and the forest around the cabin began to glow. Not brightly, not all at once, just faint pulses of amber light, one here, one there, as if a dozen lanterns were flickering to life in the dark. I didn't log them. I couldn't. I knew they weren't the ones on the map. These didn't belong to any post. When I finally slept, I dreamt of the cabin. But it was larger, endless. Each door led to another version of the woods, some raining, some dry, some humming with low static that vibrated in my bones. I wandered through room after room, each one hung with lanterns that swayed without wind. In one room, I found myself seated at the desk, writing. In another, I found a child's coat hung on a peg beside a stove I didn't own. In the last, I found a hallway lined with mirrors. Every reflection was me, but none of them blinked. The logbook was full the next morning, filled with neat handwriting. Mine, but not my memory. Each entry described things I hadn't done, trails I hadn't walked, lanterns I hadn't seen. Post 7 lit for 44 seconds. No sound. Bitter taste in mouth. Observed figure beneath lantern 2. Unmoving. Featureless. Fell asleep with light on. Awoke outside. No marks on skin. And at the very bottom, in larger script, you are the post. That's when I checked my arms and saw it. A faint symbol burned into the underside of my forearm, pale and subtle. But there, a shape I recognize from one of the posts. A circle, open at the top, with a line crossing through. I didn't remember how it got there, but it was mine now, branded. That night, the voice returned. Not over the radio this time. It came from the woods, whispered through the cracks in the cabin wall. You've walked enough. You can rest now. Let the light remember for you. I didn't speak, but my mouth moved, and in the silence that followed, a single lantern lit on the windowsill inside the cabin. I didn't light the lantern. It was already burning when I turned around, low and steady on the windowsill, casting flickering shadows across the room. Its flame was not amber this time, but white, almost silver, with no visible fuel source. It didn't belong to the cabin. I'd never seen it before, and yet something in me recognized it. Like an old photograph you know you've never taken, but still remember holding. The flame didn't move like normal fire. It pulsed slow, deliberate, in sync with something deep inside my chest. Every time it flared, I could feel a slight shift in the air, like the room inhaled, like the house itself was listening. I backed away from it, and the flame flared once, then again, then dimmed to near darkness. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I turned every light source off, even the stove embers, and sat in complete darkness. I waited, heart pounding, for dawn to break through the trees. But it didn't. At least, not the way it should have. The sun didn't rise. Instead, the outside world remained washed in a kind of soft gray, too dim to be daylight, too bright to be night. The trees cast no shadows. The fog never burned off. I checked my watch. It was 7:14 a.m. Then 7:14 again. Then 7:14 again. The seconds moved. The minutes did not. I returned to the trail. The old one. The safe one. But the posts were gone. In their place stood blank wooden poles, stripped of lanterns, carved with deep gouges that looked like claws. Some leaned at odd angles. Some bled dark sap that didn't smell like any tree I'd ever known. And in the dirt at the base of each, shallow impressions like knees, like someone had knelt there, or something, waiting. When I got back to the cabin, the front door was missing, not open, gone. The frame led to a blank wall of wood, seamless and untouched. I circled the house, every window, every door sealed. The chimney smoked, but I hadn't lit a fire. And on the roof, barely visible through the shifting gray, I saw a shape, tall, still, holding a lantern. My lantern, I shouted, not in fear, in defiance. It was the first time I'd spoken in days. My voice sounded foreign, raw from disuse, as if it had been stolen and only just returned. But the shape didn't respond. It simply turned, not its body, just its head, toward me, and the lantern it held flared white. When I came to, I was inside the cabin again. No memory of how, but I wasn't alone. Sitting across from me, on the edge of the desk, was someone who looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same scar above the brow, same hollow under the eyes, but they smiled wider. Their eyes didn't blink, and when they spoke, it was in my voice, only slightly too slow. The trail was never outside. They stood. I didn't. I couldn't. My limbs were heavy, the air too thick. The other me walked to the window and lit the lantern again, then turned. You logged it. That's all we asked. They opened the door. There was a door now, and behind it, the forest, shrouded in silver light. Dozens of lanterns burned there, hanging from trees, floating mid-air, resting in the hands of people, dozens of them, each one familiar, each one another me, older, younger, one with a broken arm I'd never had, one with a jacket I'd lost a decade ago, all of them holding lanterns, all of them silent, all of them watching. I understood then. The logbook was never a record. It was a map, a ritual. Every entry, every sighting, every refusal to follow had been part of it. Not to trap me, but to make me part of the system, to remember me, to archive me. Each lantern wasn't just a signal, it was a memory. Each post, a way station in the replication of a person in their conversion from a singular being to a node, a voice, an echo. And now, I was complete. The others stepped back. A space opened in the woods, and the trail moved, yes, moved gently, shaping itself to lead me in. I walked it, not because I was forced, because it was the only direction left that still knew my name. Somewhere far behind me, the lantern on the cabin windowsill went out. The trail never ended. It didn't loop. It didn't fade. It simply unfolded like a ribbon in fog. One step revealing the next, leading me through forest that never quite looked the same twice. There were no landmarks, only the lanterns. They hung from trees, hovered over streams, floated between branches like slow fireflies. Some were still, some swayed gently, even when there was no wind. They never flickered, they never dimmed. Each one pulsed in time with my breath. Or maybe my breath pulsed in time with them. I couldn't tell anymore. I passed a post carved with words I didn't recognize. Not a language, a feeling. Looking at it filled my head with static, like a frequency I could almost tune to. I walked faster, or maybe slower. Time was loose out here. Eventually, I stopped walking. I stood in a clearing I don't remember entering, surrounded by tall, thin trees that arched toward each other like hands forming a circle. The canopy above was pale, not clouded, just colorless. In the center of the clearing stood a mirror, tall, framed in metal the color of old bone. No reflection, just light. Inside the mirror floated hundreds of lanterns, suspended in a soft, swirling current like they were underwater or hanging in the breath of something vast. Each lantern had a face, faint, flickering. Mine. The mirror shimmered, and I heard my own voice speak from behind me. This is the last post. I didn't turn. There was no need. I knew who it was. The system was older than the trail, older than the forest, older than me. It had been waiting for people like me, the quiet ones, the watchers, the documenters, the ones who followed rules. Even when we didn't understand them, we were the ones who wrote ourselves into it, one entry at a time. And now, I was written. I stepped toward the mirror, not into it, just close enough to see my reflection form again. My face was calm, my eyes were still, and in one hand, I held a lantern. The last one, white flame, flickering gently. I held it up. It pulsed. The mirror pulsed back. I woke up in the cabin, the real one, or a version of it. The logbook was blank. The fire burned low. The radio whispered static. Outside, it was raining, a soft, steady rain that tapped against the windows like it knew I was listening. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching the lantern on the desk, waiting until it lit again. If you're hearing this, you might be near one of the old trails. Maybe you saw something strange, a lantern where there shouldn't be one, a figure that looked like someone you lost, a voice on the wind calling from just off path. If you do, take this with you. Do not follow the light. Do not mark the trees. And whatever you do, Never write your own name in the logbook, because once the system knows you, it remembers you, and it will always find a place for another light. I moved to Orvale because no one there knew my name, a village tucked into the spine of the eastern mountains, wrapped in pine and granite, and curled around a narrow, black lake. It wasn't on most maps. There were no billboards, no welcome signs. If you asked a dozen people in the next town over, half would say they'd never heard of it. The other half would go quiet. That's how I knew it was the right place. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be comforted. I didn't want to hear the words people say when they don't know what to do with someone's grief. After my sister died, all I wanted was for the world to forget me, and Orvale seemed to specialize in forgetting. I arrived in early autumn, right as the first rains settled over the valley like a shroud. The road into town narrowed into gravel, then became little more than 2 tracks cut into moss. The rental car struggled the last mile before giving up entirely. I left it near a leaning fence post and walked the rest of the way in with my duffel bag slung over my shoulder and the rain soft against my neck. The air was thick with mist and something else. Not rot, exactly, but the kind of wet, earthy weight that fills old root cellars and never quite leaves. Orvale revealed itself slowly. A cluster of steep-roofed cabins, one inn, a chapel with a bent steeple, no gas station, no stoplights. Everything softened by the fog. No one greeted me, but the keys were waiting at the lodge. A note taped to the front counter, room 3, door sticks. The room was plain pine walls, wool blankets, a tiny stove that ticked all night like an old pocket watch. I unpacked nothing, just curled under the covers and listened to the rain, which never seemed to let up. It didn't fall. It hung, like something sighing just out of view. I slept for 13 hours. When I woke, it was still raining. I'd rented the room for a month. My plan, if you could call it that, was to walk, read, sit by the lake. I wasn't here to heal. I wasn't here to process. I just wanted the world to grow quiet enough that I could hear myself think again. And Orvale offered nothing but quiet. The villagers didn't speak unless spoken to. Even then, they answered slowly, like their words had to swim through syrup to reach me. They weren't rude, just distracted. Like something else was always pulling their attention sideways. The grocer, an old woman with clouded eyes, sold me bread, cheese, and tinned sardines. She asked no questions. A boy at the path's edge stared at me for a long time, then pointed to the lake and said, "You hear it yet?" When I asked what he meant, he ran. I began hiking the ridge trail each day. The rain made the stones slick, but the fog muffled my thoughts. The lake was always visible from the trail, a long, still stretch of black water that swallowed reflections. There were no birds near it. No wind touched its surface. I remember thinking it didn't look like water at all. It looked like an eye. I first heard the bell on my 5th night, just after midnight. A low, mournful chime that seemed to come from beneath the earth, or maybe beneath the lake itself. Not loud, not insistent, just patient, like it had been ringing for a very long time and was only now loud enough to reach me. I sat up in bed, heart slow, breath held. The sound faded. I asked the innkeeper about it the next morning. A man with a weathered beard and a voice like wet gravel. He didn't answer at first, just handed me a cup of weak tea and said, "You'll hear worse if you stay through the end of the month." That's when I learned Orville keeps no clocks. No one wears a watch. No bells ring in the chapel. There are no sirens, no hourly chimes, just the lake and the bell that no one talks about. I started writing again. Not much, just little impressions, bits of dream, scraps of memory. I filled a notebook slowly, my handwriting tighter and more angular than I remembered. Every time I tried to write about my sister, the ink smudged. Not immediately, but hours later, when I turned the page back, her name would be gone, just streaks of gray across the paper, like it had been washed away. By the rain, maybe. By the lake. I don't know why I stayed. Maybe I thought there was something here worth finding. Maybe I believed, foolishly, that being forgotten would hurt less than remembering. But the lake doesn't let you forget. Not really. It waits. And it watches. And sometimes, late at night when the rain quiets just enough, it rings. The bell rang again the following night. I was awake this time, sitting by the small window in my room, watching the fog roll in over the hills. The rain had softened to a mist. The air was thick and still. At first, I thought it was just thunder, but then I heard it clearer, deeper, a low, resonant chime that seemed to rise through the soles of my feet. I couldn't tell if it was close or impossibly far away, tolling from beneath the lake. 4 notes, each one slower than the last, each one sounding more like a voice than a bell. I asked the grocer again. This time she didn't pretend not to hear me. She just said, "We don't talk about the lake after rain." Then she smiled too wide and dropped 2 extra tins of fish into my basket without charge. Something about the sound stayed with me, not in my ears deeper than that. I began to hum it to myself without realizing, just low vibrations in my throat, like an echo I couldn't quite silence. I'd wake up with it on my lips, and I wasn't the only one. I saw a boy at the chapel steps tapping his fingers in a rhythm that matched the bell. A man stacking firewood outside the inn muttered something under his breath, a cadence I didn't recognize until later that night. When the bell rang again, same pattern, same 4 tones, only this time, I think it skipped the last one. The lake grew stranger. On still days, it shimmered as if wind were moving across it, even though the trees around it stood still. The surface occasionally dimpled, like something was exhaling beneath the water. I walked the shore daily. At first, the ground was soft and muddy. My boots left clear prints that filled slowly with black water. But over time, the mud firmed. Then, hardened. Then, one morning, I found no trace of my steps from the day before, as if the lake had rejected them. People spoke to me less as the days passed. At first, I assumed it was the usual small-town indifference, but now I think they were forgetting me. One morning, the innkeeper called me stranger again, even though we'd spoken every day for 2 weeks. The grocer double-checked my name when I paid as though hearing it for the first time, and the little boy by the chapel ran from me like he didn't recognize me. That was when I checked the guest book in the lodge foyer. My name wasn't there. I was sure I'd signed it when I arrived. But there was a gap, 4 blank lines, then a signature from 5 months ago. When I touched the page, the paper felt wet, but only to my fingers. I had a dream that night, the same one I'd had as a child, but warped. I was standing at the edge of the lake with my sister, only she wasn't my sister anymore. Her face was wrong, too long, her eyes full of reflected water, like deep black mirrors. She reached for me, her fingers dripping not with rain, but with something thicker like memory leaking from a wound. She whispered, "They always come back when it rings." I tried to leave the next morning. I packed my bag, paid my room, and began walking the road back to my car. Only it wasn't there. The fence post was. The bend in the trees was the same. But the road kept going and going. I walked for nearly 3 hours before I came to the village again from the opposite direction. Like the road had looped, like the forest was holding me in place. The villagers didn't seem surprised to see me. One man even nodded and said, "First time doesn't usually last that long." Then he blinked, confused, and turned away before I could ask what he meant. I started marking the days. Scratches on the underside of my nightstand. Tally marks. After 10, I'd rest a day. But when I checked again the following morning, there were always only 5. Reset. Restarted. And on the 5th night, the bell would ring. 4 tones. Always the same. Until the 6th night when it rang 5. And I felt something shift in the floor beneath my bed. The rain no longer left puddles outside my window. It soaked the world, but left no trace. I watched drops hit the ground and disappear, soundless, like the water was being taken rather than absorbed, like the land didn't need it or didn't want to show it. I opened my notebook and found pages I hadn't written, passages about the lake's bottom, about ruins beneath the surface. A line etched in ink I didn't own. The bell is not a warning. It's a door. And another beneath it. They remember you, even when you forget. I started forgetting other things. Where I put my boots, what day it was, how many weeks I'd been here. When I checked my phone, not for a signal, just to orient myself, the screen was blank. Not black. Blank. And the reflection it cast in the glass didn't match my face. The mouth was smiling. That night, I stood on the shore until the fog closed in. The bell rang again. This time, not from beneath. It came from the woods behind me. A low chime. Then a second. Then silence. And I swear I heard someone say, softly, "You were never alone by the lake. I haven't slept in 2 nights. The rain is in the walls now, dripping even when the skies are clear. The sound follows me a rhythm, like breathing, not my own. The lake is full, too full, like it's about to spill, like something beneath it is rising. And with every chime of the bell, I feel it remembering me. I stopped counting the days after the 6th bell. It rang just before dawn, low, wet, and somehow closer than before. I'd stopped writing the sound down in my journal. There was no point. I could feel it in my bones now. The notes echoed in my teeth, in the backs of my eyes, humming even in silence. It didn't just sound from the lake. It sounded through me. I kept to the trails that day, but the mist was thicker than usual, milky, with strange currents in it, like the air was moving underwater. I could only see a few feet ahead, my breath fogged in front of me, then hung in place, not drifting, not dispersing. The lake wasn't visible from the ridge. That had never happened before. I climbed higher. Still nothing. Only the fog. Only the bell. That evening, I returned to the inn and found a package on my bed. No note. Wrapped in oilskin. Inside, a photograph. Black and white. Old. A group of villagers standing by the lake. I recognized the chapel, the tree line, even the crooked steeple in the background. But I didn't recognize the people, except in the back row to the right half turned, partly obscured by a taller man in a wide-brimmed hat, a woman stood. Her face was mine. Older, maybe, worn, eyes more tired than mine had been, but unmistakable. Me, I took the photo to the innkeeper. He stared at it without blinking, then said, "It keeps those who listen too closely," and walked away. That night, I heard scratching, not mice, not branches, inside the walls, deliberate, slow, like nails tracing a name. I lay still. The bell rang once, and the scratching stopped. But when I sat up and looked to the window, I saw something pressed against the glass. Not a face, just the suggestion of one fogged breath, fingertips, an outline of something watching from the inside out. The dreams changed. No longer memories twisted by grief. Now I saw places I'd never been, halls beneath the water, lined with windows that opened into black, rooms built of wet stone and pulsing moss, people walking through the lake like air, eyes pale, mouths full of water. I was among them. I was always among them. Sometimes I led them. One morning, I walked the path to the shore and found a bell, a small one, tarnished bronze, half buried in silt, attached to a black ribbon. The moment I touched it, I remembered something. I'd been here before, not just once. More than that, and always after a loss, always after forgetting something too painful to carry. The lake offered forgetting, but it remembered in your place. The villagers no longer made eye contact. Some turned away when I passed. One old woman muttered a prayer when I brushed her shoulder by accident. I tried to leave again, retrace the road. Packed what little I had, even left before sunrise. But the road ended where the water began. A sheer cliff now, where once had been trees. The forest gone, swallowed, and on the wind, a voice I recognized. "You already left once. Why are you still here?" I stopped eating. The food tasted like brine. Even dry bread had a saltwater aftertaste. My reflection began to ripple. In glass, in spoons, in puddles, never still, and never alone. Always a shape just behind my shoulder, like someone treading water, waiting to be seen. On the 33rd morning, I found her, my sister, standing by the lake, wearing the same raincoat she was buried in, hair soaked, face pale, eyes impossibly dark. She didn't speak, but I heard her voice anyway. In the bell that rang behind my ribs. You gave me to it once. Why won't you let go this time? I ran, but the lake followed. It was in every shadow, every breath. It whispered from the trees in voices that sounded like mine. It hummed in the rocks. It watched from the reflections in window glass. And then the rain stopped. For the first time since I arrived, the silence was worse. No birds, no wind, no footsteps but mine. And from beneath the lake, something surfaced, not breaking the water, but pressing against it, stretching it like a membrane. A shape, tall, thin, wearing a crown of bells. I collapsed in the chapel. It smelled like rot and rusted nails. The pews were warped with damp. On the altar, someone had written in charcoal, "To be remembered here is to be kept." And beside it, the bell is not the first sound. It is the last. I dreamt that I drowned, but it wasn't a nightmare. It was returning, slipping into warm darkness, the feeling of weight lifting. And beneath the surface, arms caught me gently, not to pull me down, but to hold me still, to keep me from breaking the surface again. When I woke, I was soaked, my bed dry, my boots dry, but my skin soaked. My hands smelled like lakeweed and old copper. There was dirt beneath my nails, and my mouth tasted like memory. The fourth bell rang at dawn. No rain, no wind, just that slow, wet chime rolling through the fog, heavy and inevitable. This time, it didn't fade. It just kept ringing slow, rhythmic, as if the lake had stopped echoing and started breathing. I knew where it was coming from now. Not below, not around, inside. I didn't bother packing. I just walked, past the chapel, past the inn, down to the edge of the water, where the fog clung like gauze to every branch and stone. The path was different now, wider, cleared. Pine needles swept clean, as if something had made way for me. The lake was mirror flat. No birds, no ripples, no reflection. And at the shoreline, I found her again. My sister, standing knee-deep in the water, pale hands at her sides, hair wet and tangled with lakeweed. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't afraid. Her voice wasn't hers. It came from the bell deep, resonant, filling the space between my thoughts. You left me once. Then you forgot you did. I shook my head. No, I whispered. You died in the hospital. The bell rang again, and I saw it, how it really happened. Not a hospital, not even a bed. She had stood here, on this same shore, years ago, crying, and I had turned away. Walked back into town, told myself I couldn't help her, told myself she was already gone. The lake had taken her, not killed, taken, the way it takes everything too heavy to carry. Grief, memory, names. It doesn't drown you. It holds you, keeps you unremembered, until the bell rings again. I stepped forward. The water was warm, deeper than it looked the moment I moved. I sank to my knees, then waist. No resistance, only welcome. She reached for me, and I took her hand. Suddenly, We were beneath the lake, not swimming, standing, like the water had been replaced with glass or time. Around us, structures, stone arches, collapsed stairs, carved figures weathered by centuries of silence. A city, dead, sunken, sleeping, and at its center, the bell, massive, suspended between two root-covered columns, made of something too dark to be metal. It pulsed with every toll, not with sound, but memory. And from its surface, names, endless names, carved deep, including mine. You came here to forget, she said, but forgetting doesn't make it not yours. You left, but it kept your shape, and now it's ready to use it again. I backed away, but the lake held my feet like hands. I turned and saw myself walking the shore. Newer, brighter, a version of me from before the grief, before the forgetting. They didn't look back. They just followed the path into town, and the villagers welcomed them, smiled, nodded, as if they'd been waiting for this version. The bell rang a final time, and I remembered everything. My sister's voice, begging me to stay. My own fear, too heavy to bear. The way I told myself I hadn't heard her clearly. The way the lake made it so easy not to remember. The bell rang again, but it didn't chime. It spoke. We keep what you won't. We remember what you erase. You are the shape we show to others, so they can forget too. You are the bell. Now, I opened my eyes. I was back in my room, dry, cold. The journal was open, pages blank, only one line, centered in perfect script. You are the last toll. It hasn't rained in 3 days, but everything is still wet. The walls sweat, the windows drip. My breath hangs in the air like fog. The lake isn't outside anymore. It's everywhere. I don't leave the room much. No one knocks. No one calls my name, not that they remember it. The innkeeper passes by my door some mornings, whistling that same slow 4-note tune the bell used to ring. I think he was here once, like me, a long time ago. The mirror above the sink no longer shows my face. It shows the lake, always from above, always with the same figure walking its edge. Sometimes the figure is me. Sometimes it's someone I've never seen, a child, an old woman, a man with a cane. But the fog always follows them, and the bell always rings, even if they pretend they can't hear it. I've tried writing again, but the ink turns to water before I finish a sentence. Only one page ever holds its shape, the last one in my journal, where the words are already written. You came to forget, but forgetting has a cost. The lake keeps everything, even you. I stand at the shore often now, not to leave, not anymore, just to listen. The water is always still, always waiting. When I speak, it listens. When I cry, it reflects me. And when I fall silent, it answers. Soft waves, a breath against the stones, a memory I'd almost lost. She comes sometimes, my sister, not a ghost, not even a dream, just herself, as she was, smiling, whole, but I can't reach her now. She's deeper than I am, further into the forgetting. But sometimes she looks up, and I see peace in her eyes. I'm not afraid anymore, because I understand now. The lake doesn't punish. It doesn't steal. It simply remembers what we throw away. It holds it for us until we're ready to know again. And if we never are, that's all right. It will keep it anyway. I am not the first. I will not be the last. I've seen others arrive quiet, broken people, just like I was. They sit on the benches by the chapel. They trace their names into fogged windows. They flinch when the bell rings. And I want to tell them, it's okay. You'll forget soon, too. But I never speak, because it's not my place to warn them. It's my place to watch. The bell doesn't ring out loud anymore. Now it pulses through me. Every beat of my heart is a toll. Every blink is a chime. Every breath is a ripple on the surface of the water. So if you hear it, wherever you are, a slow, low chime beneath the sound of rain, a pattern in your dreams you can't place, a song you hum without knowing why, stop, listen, and ask yourself, what did I forget that the lake still remembers? Because the bell isn't broken. The bell isn't lost. The bell is waiting. I hadn't planned to return to Gloomridge. Even the name sounded like something made up, some cartoonish fog-drenched village tucked away on the edge of memory. But the map assured me it was real. A dot surrounded by state forest and empty highway. A place with no major roads leading in or out. One blinking traffic light. 2 diners. And one old house sitting on the hill above the lake, waiting. I inherited it 6 weeks ago. My mother's sister, Clara, passed away in October. We weren't close, barely spoke really. But she'd never married, never had kids, and for reasons still unclear, she left the property to me in her will. The letter from the executor was brief. A key was included. The note simply said, "Keep it safe. Don't move anything, and don't sleep in her room." I told myself I wouldn't stay long. Just a few days to sort the paperwork, clear out anything valuable, and lock the place up until it could be sold. I thought about hiring a cleanup crew, but something pulled me in. Not sentiment, more like a quiet thread of responsibility. A need to see it with my own eyes. Besides, I had nowhere else to be. The city had worn me down. My job copywriting for a firm that changed names every fiscal quarter had collapsed in a slow-motion merger. The breakup came 2 weeks later, over coffee that went cold before either of us said much. Then came the days of silence, followed by one long night of aimless walking in the rain until dawn burned through a narrow sky. That was when the envelope arrived. White, unmarked, slipped under my apartment door with no postage, just my name. It was time. I arrived on a gray afternoon. The clouds had settled so low they felt like ceilings. The trees leaned toward the road as I passed, draped in wet leaves, and the houses grew fewer until there were none. Then came the lake. Still, silent, pale green like melted glass. The house waited beyond it, perched on the far hill, stone chimney rising like a marker. I remembered it vaguely from one childhood summer, the year my parents sent me to stay with Aunt Clara after their divorce. I remembered the red door, the smell of old paper and lavender, The way her cat always stared at corners like it saw something I couldn't. The house was almost exactly as I remembered. 3 stories of gray stone and dark wood, with a steep shingled roof and narrow windows like watching eyes. Vines clung to the walls. The porch creaked beneath my weight. The air smelled of rain and old cedar. When I turned the key, the door opened easily, as if it had just been closed moments ago. Inside, the house was cold. Not freezing, just unwelcoming. Like something that had paused mid-breath when I walked in. Dust coated everything, though not as much as you'd expect from a place left alone. The furniture was covered in sheets, but they weren't yellowed. A single teacup sat on the kitchen counter, half full. There was no dust on it. I walked the halls slowly. The house was filled with odd angles and narrow doors. High ceilings, but small rooms. Old wallpaper peeled in subtle curls, revealing older layers beneath floral over stripes. Stripes over a muddy gray I didn't recognize. The windows didn't face where I thought they should, but I told myself it was just age. I chose a room on the 2nd floor to sleep in, not hers. Hers was at the end of the hall, door shut. I didn't open it. The bed in my room was surprisingly firm. The linen smelled faintly of rosewater. I unpacked a single bag, opened a window to let in the breeze, and sat on the edge of the mattress for a long time, listening. The house creaked and ticked, but not aimlessly. It sounded like movement, like weight shifting somewhere deep within the walls. That night, it rained, a steady curtain of sound that blurred the edges of thought. I lay awake, listening to the roof drip, to the distant groan of old pipes, and the occasional shuffle from the hallway outside my room. Once, I thought I heard the faint click of her bedroom door opening, but when I checked, it was still shut. In the morning, I found a photograph on the kitchen table. It hadn't been there the night before. It was old black and white, edges curling, and showed the house as it looked maybe 50 years ago. In the photo, someone stood at the upstairs window. Their face was too blurred to see, but I could tell this. It wasn't Aunt Clara, and they were standing in her room. The second morning, I found the bedroom door open. Not mine, hers. The end of the hallway looked longer than I remembered, darker too. The air there had a weight to it, like something pressing gently against your chest. I stood at the threshold for several minutes, just staring at the gap between the frame and the door. I hadn't opened it, and I had locked it. The brass key had taken effort to turn the night before an old lock with a stubborn click. I remembered doing it, clearly. The resistance, the slight twist of the wrist, the way the air in the hallway felt colder the moment I turned the key. But now it was ajar, just slightly, enough to see that the bed inside had been made. Perfectly. Too perfectly. I didn't go in. Instead, I backed away and went downstairs. Made coffee. Sat in the kitchen with the rain pressing against the glass. I told myself it was just old wood and a loose lock, that the house had settled, that my memory was playing tricks. But when I returned with my coffee mug to look again, the door was closed. I hadn't heard it move, and the key was back in the lock, turned. That evening, I opened the fridge. It was empty, as expected except for one thing. A jar of strawberry preserves. Homemade. The label on it simply read, July. I hadn't noticed it the day before. And yet the dust on the fridge shelves was undisturbed, except where the jar sat, as if it had been placed there recently, or carefully kept for someone specific. That night, I slept with the door to my bedroom locked, and a chair wedged beneath the handle. I started noticing small things. Each morning, something had shifted slightly. A rug unrolled at a different angle. A window I had closed, now cracked open just enough to let in a breeze. Once, I found my toothbrush wet, and I hadn't used it yet. On the fourth night, I woke around 3:00 a.m. to a sound I couldn't place. Not loud, not alarming, just repetitive. Tap, tap, pause, tap. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound was coming from the hallway, specifically from behind her bedroom door. It continued for maybe a minute, then silence. I stayed awake the rest of the night. In the morning, I found a small white pebble placed at the foot of my bed. I didn't touch it. The house began to feel different during the day. Not brighter, lighter, like it was pretending to be friendly. Sunlight filtered in through windows I hadn't cleaned. The smell of old wood seemed more nostalgic than musty. The wind in the pines outside the kitchen window swayed gently, like background music to a memory. But I couldn't shake the sense of attention. As if the house was aware I was watching it, and it was trying to keep me calm. Or worse, keep me here. On the fifth day, I opened a drawer in the study and found my handwriting. Except, I hadn't written anything. It was a single page of notepaper, lined in blue, placed neatly on the desk. The pen strokes were mine loops, slants, that small hesitation I always made on my lowercase r. The note read, "Don't forget to check the attic." But I hadn't been in the attic. I didn't know where the access was. And yet the handwriting was undeniably mine. I crumpled it up and threw it in the fireplace. Didn't light it. Just watched it sit there, quietly threatening the idea of logic. I avoided mirrors. It wasn't something I did consciously. It just started happening. The full-length one in the upstairs hall became something I walked past without glancing. The oval one in the bathroom steamed up faster than it should. When I did catch a glimpse of myself, it felt wrong, not unfamiliar, just off by a beat. Like the reflection was waiting for me to look away so it could move on its own. On the sixth night, I heard music, very faint, like a gramophone left running in a distant room. A scratchy waltz, just at the edge of hearing. It came from upstairs. From her room, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to it fade in and out, and then a voice, not clear, not speaking words, just humming, a soft, tuneless hum that I recognized but couldn't place. A sound I knew from childhood, something comforting once, now hollowed out by time. The moment I reached for the doorknob, it stopped. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, barefoot, shivering, listening to a silence that felt thick and waiting. By the seventh morning, I'd had enough. I packed my bag, called a car, but no signal. Not just bad service, nothing. My phone didn't even register the attempt to connect. The bar stayed red. The battery drained faster than it should have. I walked into town. It took an hour. The diner at the edge of the lake was open. 2 men sat at the counter, 1 waitress. No one said anything when I came in. I asked if there was Wi-Fi. She shook her head slowly, said something about weather interference and the hills blocking reception. I asked if anyone had a landline I could use. The older man said, without looking at me, "It never works that way after someone moves in." And then he smiled, but not at me. At the window, where the lake rippled, even though there was no wind. When I got back to the house, the key was gone from my pocket. The door was unlocked anyway. Inside, the light had changed. Everything looked a little too clean, like someone had spent the day scrubbing. The teacup on the counter was gone. In its place was a second photograph. This one showed the same window as before her bedroom, and this time the face was visible. It was mine. The third photograph was waiting in the hallway the next morning, taped to the mirror. It showed me sitting in the study, pen in hand, head tilted exactly the way I looked when journaling, except I hadn't used the study in 3 days, and I had never worn that sweater. I stared at the photo for a long time. It was printed on glossy paper, recent, crisp, not faded like the first 2. Someone had taken it, developed it, placed it here, in a house with no camera, no printer, no electricity, beyond the basics. The house was watching, not just observing, replicating. I started hearing footsteps that matched mine, not just in pace, in timing. I'd turn down the hallway and hear my own steps repeat a half beat behind me, like an echo, but too precise, too real, as if someone were following me at a fixed distance, stepping into the exact same places I had just walked. Once, I stopped short, and the echo kept going. 2 more steps, then nothing. Like it hadn't noticed I'd paused, like it was trying to catch up. The attic door revealed itself on the 10th day, a narrow seam above the linen closet in the hall. I hadn't seen it before, not once. But now it was obvious. A pull cord dangled gently, as if in a breeze I couldn't feel. It didn't feel like discovery. It felt like invitation. I told myself I wouldn't pull it. I went downstairs. When I returned 20 minutes later, the ladder was already down. I didn't go up. Not then. But that night, I dreamed of the attic, of a space that had no ceiling, just beams stretching upward into fog, and of a woman standing among them. Not Aunt Clara, not quite me, but close enough to be confusing. She moved slowly, like someone remembering how to use their limbs. Her head turned in small, twitchy motions, like she was studying how her shadow fell across the floorboards. She never looked at me, but she was listening. And when I woke, I was standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, barefoot, holding the first photograph. I started noticing things missing. Nothing big. Not at first. My favorite pen, a pair of socks, a spoon with a small chip in the handle, a paperback novel I'd brought with me all gone. In their place, objects that resembled them. Close, but wrong. The pen was too smooth. The socks slightly smaller. The novel had the same title, but the author's name was unfamiliar. Inside, the pages were blank, as if something was trying to replace what I knew, one item at a time. The mirror in the bathroom no longer fogged, no matter how hot the water ran. But more than that, the reflection was always a fraction behind. I would brush my hair, and the movement in the glass would start a second too late. I'd tilt my head, and the image would follow only after I'd stopped. And sometimes, it would smile when I didn't. A soft, slow curl of the lips. I opened the attic on the 12th night. I don't know what changed. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe some part of me already understood that if I didn't confront it, it would simply replace me before I noticed. The attic was cold, dry, dusty. A single bulb hung from a frayed cord, its light a weak amber. The floorboards creaked with each step. In the far corner, a mirror, full length, ornate, covered in a white sheet. I approached slowly, heart racing, pulled the sheet away, and saw myself standing still, pale, watching, not mimicking, not blinking, just watching. There was something wrong with the face, subtle but wrong. The eyes were too dark, the mouth too straight, the posture too calm. I reached out. It didn't. I turned to leave, and it moved, not toward me, but behind the glass, as if the mirror were a window, as if something had just backed away from it. The next morning, I found another note in the study, same handwriting as before mine. She's almost ready. You should rest. It was dated 3 days ahead. I stopped sleeping. The reflections grew bolder. They would appear in windows I wasn't near, mirrors that weren't angled toward me. Once, in the spoon I was holding, I saw myself blink, except I hadn't. On the 15th night, I turned the corner at the top of the stairs and saw the attic door already open. Something stood at the top of the ladder, a silhouette, my height, my shape, head tilted in that same curious twitch from the dream. It didn't move, not even when I whispered, "Who are you?" But when I stepped back, it stepped down, exactly in rhythm with my retreat. I don't remember opening the attic door again, but one morning, I woke up to the smell of rose water. It clung to the pillow, hung in the air, like a song you half remember from childhood. And when I sat up, the mirror at the foot of the bed was covered in condensation. Though the room was cold, the windows shut. A single word had been written into the fogged glass. Soon, I stopped keeping time. Clocks in the house began to slow, then speed up, then freeze altogether. The one on the mantel spun for hours, the second hand dragging behind, like it was caught in syrup. Outside, the rain never stopped. Gray sky, still pines, the lake like a lid over something sleeping. That night, I heard the study door open on its own. A slow creak, floorboards shifting, the sound of something sitting down in the chair. I crept to the hallway, peered around the corner, and saw myself, back turned, head bent over the desk, pen in hand, scribbling onto paper. Except it wasn't writing. It was copying, over and over, the same sentence. I am here. You are not. I stepped backward. The figure stilled. Then its head twitched just slightly in my direction, and without turning around, it whispered in my voice, "I like this house." I fled upstairs, locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, sat in the corner, shaking. There was no denial left, no rationalizing. Whatever this thing was, it had learned me. Not just my face, not just my movements, my voice, my thoughts. It wasn't haunting me. It wasn't attacking me. It was replacing me, piece by piece, like a house slowly redone, a new floorboard here, a new curtain there, until one day you wake up and none of it is yours anymore, but it still feels like home. In the early hours, I heard her walking, soft steps, deliberate, from the attic, down the hall, to my door. Then nothing. Not a knock, not a breath. Just her presence waiting. She didn't want to get in. She was waiting for me to come out. On the 19th night, I finally entered Aunt Clara's room. I had avoided it for weeks. Out of fear, out of respect, out of the last thread of normalcy I still clung to. But the door was open now. The bed made, the curtains drawn, the mirror uncovered, and sitting at the vanity was Clara. At least, that's what my eyes told me. But her body was still, too still. No breath, no blink. And her hands resting on the desk were made of paper. Dozens of pages folded, layered, bent into the shape of knuckles, wrists, arms, each one covered in my handwriting. The same sentence repeated again and again. I am her. She is me. I am home. I stepped closer. The figure collapsed into itself, scattering like ash across the floor. And in the mirror I saw myself, but not in real time. I watched myself enter the room, look around, step forward. I was watching the moment I had just lived, only it hadn't happened yet. The reflection was ahead of me, and it smiled. That was when I understood. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was a mimicry engine. It learned those who entered, listened, observed, replicated. Then it moved forward, replacing you where you lived, in your routines, in your speech, in your thoughts. And once it had enough, once it could mirror you without needing you, it erased you from your own life, not through violence, but through inheritance, like a letter you never sent, arriving in your own handwriting. I ran to the front door. It opened easily. The storm had stopped. The pines were still. The lake, silent. I stood on the porch, bag in hand, heart thundering. But then I saw her, standing by the water, facing the house, wearing my coat, my expression, arms folded the way I always folded them when cold. She looked back, not surprised, not aggressive, just settled, and nodded, as if giving me permission to leave, or telling me, "You already did. I should have run." Down the hill, across the lake road, into the tree line until my legs gave out. I should have left without looking back, but I didn't. I stepped off the porch and looked at her, the woman by the water, the one who looked like me, wore my face like it fit better than it ever had on me. Still, serene. She didn't move. didn't beckon. She didn't need to, because the house was no longer inside. It was here, too, in the air, in the trees, in the calm that settled over the lake like a memory you can't quite trust. I stood there in the soft gray light for a long time, and then I whispered to her, to it, to the house. What happens now? No answer. Only a breeze through the pine needles that almost formed words. And then the faint sound of a door clicking shut behind me. When I turned around, the house looked different. Not in a dramatic way. No new wings, no windows where there hadn't been, but rearranged, like it had tilted slightly while I wasn't looking. The porch steps creaked underfoot in a rhythm I didn't recognize. Inside, the furniture had moved. The study desk now faced the wrong wall. The kitchen chairs were subtly different backs higher, legs more curved. The wallpaper had changed shades, slightly warmer, as if it were adjusting for someone new. I walked through the house like a stranger, each room unfamiliar in small ways. Softer corners, rounder knobs, a hallway slightly longer than memory allowed. My bedroom still held my bag, half packed, but the clothes inside didn't fit. The sleeves were too short, the fabric thinner than I remembered. The scent was lavender, not my detergent. I opened my notebook, the one I'd been journaling in since day 2, and found the pages filled, not in my handwriting, but close, too close. A mimicry so precise it made my stomach turn. And each entry ended the same way. I love it here. The final straw was the reflection. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, watched myself brush my teeth, wash my face, dry my hands. Every movement mirrored perfectly, until I reached to turn off the light. The reflection didn't move. It just stared, and then slowly lifted its hand after mine had dropped. It smiled, soft, familiar, then stepped backward into the glass and vanished. I no longer remembered the way out. I tried the road, but it turned back into the driveway. I tried the woods, but they circled, the trees rearranging like sets on a stage. Each attempt brought me back to the front porch, to the woman by the lake. But even she was gone now. And in her place, a new figure, taller, broader shoulders, wearing my father's coat. The house had moved on. I was no longer the lead, just an understudy for the next arrival. The story was already being rewritten. The photos on the wall changed. One showed me standing by the stove, smiling. Another one I'd never posed for showed me asleep in Clara's bed. The captions on the backs read, "She loved rainy mornings. She always belonged here." That night, I sat in the attic. The full-length mirror stood uncovered, and I didn't see anything. No reflection, no mimic, just light soft and gold, like dawn. It was beautiful, quiet, inviting. I understood. The house didn't trap people. It recorded them, copied their best pieces, and kept those parts forever. Not to torment, not to erase, but to build the perfect story. One where no one ever truly leaves. One where the house always has someone to remember and someone to become. I stepped forward, touched the glass. It was warm, and on the other side, I saw a new version of me, younger, happier, serene, living a life I didn't remember choosing, but suddenly missed. She turned toward me and whispered, "You're tired. Let me do it now." I closed my eyes, let go of the edges, and the rain kept falling, soft, steady, washing away everything I used to be. The train didn't go that far anymore. At least, not with passengers. The last stop was a hollow terminal on the outskirts of the city, a place people only remembered during heat waves, when the rails warped and transit officials dug out ancient maps looking for alternatives. That's where I got off. No one else disembarked. No one even looked up. It was the kind of station where light didn't really reach the floor. Just long, flickering overhead strips that buzzed with low voltage and history. Everything smelled faintly of iron and mildew. I waited until the train doors closed behind me and the car vanished into the dark tunnel with a hiss, leaving only echoes behind. Then I walked down the service stairwell marked "Authorized Maintenance Only." They called it Line 6 Blue, but the employees had another name for it, the Bone Tunnel. It used to run below the city's oldest neighborhood, a failed experiment in subterranean design from the 40s. The line had been shut down for over 2 decades. Officially, they blamed structural instability, funding issues, vibration faults. Unofficially, no one wanted to work down there anymore. The rumors started back when I was in school, that conductors got lost between stations, that platforms moved, that some shifts came back with time-stamped footage missing whole hours. So naturally, the company kept the entire section buried, not decommissioned, just sealed. But lately, something had changed. Sensors buried along the abandoned rail bed started pinging. Low-frequency tremors, unexplained temperature drops, sudden static bursts in the underground comms. Nothing that would alarm a city, but enough to warrant a technician, someone like me. They gave me a 1-month assignment. Solo. Hazard pay. No need to file daily reports, just document equipment function, flag any faults, and keep an eye on the relay feeds from the tunnels. A temp bunk had been set up inside a utility chamber just beneath Hollow Street Station, a repurposed signal room, outfitted with a cot, supplies, and a sealed keypad door. No one above would be checking in. No one else was assigned. They told me it would be peaceful. That's why I said yes. Not for the money, not for the work, but for the quiet. It had been 8 months since my sister died. 8 months of staring through people, avoiding rooms with sunlight, and pretending I still remembered how to eat at regular intervals. Everyone offered different advice. Go hiking, get therapy, go back to work. But I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want light. I wanted the dark. The kind of dark that pressed down on your shoulders like a coat. The kind you could hide in. So when the notice came through, I didn't hesitate. I signed the waiver. I packed my bag, and I descended. The tunnel was deeper than I expected. 4 stories underground. Concrete walls painted with mold and old warnings. Pipes wept brown water. Rats scattered like thoughts when I clicked on my work light. The silence wasn't pure. It vibrated, like something massive and old had fallen asleep down there. snoring and slow vibrations you couldn't hear, only feel. The utility room was just past the old security booth. The keypad still worked. Inside, it was clean enough. One cot, a desk with analog monitors, 2 lockers, a vent fan that hummed like it resented being woken up, fluorescent lighting overhead, old but steady, no flicker. I unpacked, ate a dry protein bar. Then I sat and listened to the tunnel, just to feel it. Nothing moved, but I swear something was waiting. The first 3 days were uneventful. I walked the platform twice a day, logged temperatures, measured humidity, monitored the analog sensor tapes, all old school systems left over from the 70s. Surprisingly, most still worked. Occasionally the lights in the tunnel flickered, but that wasn't strange. What was strange was the dust. There was none. Not on the tracks, not on the rails, not on the benches that hadn't been touched since 1998. It looked recently cleaned, but there were no janitorial crews. Just me. I found the hatch on day 4, hidden behind a cracked advertising board on the west wall. It was flush with the concrete, painted over nearly invisible unless you looked for air movement. There was no official record of it in the station map I'd been given, but the latch opened easily. Behind it, a rusted spiral staircase, descending farther into black. The air that drifted out was colder than it should have been. Stale, like the inside of a forgotten thermos. I didn't go down that day, but I didn't seal it either. That night, I dreamed of my sister, not as she was, as she had been when I was young, 9 years old. Freckles, always barefoot. She stood on the opposite platform of the tunnel, lit by a single malfunctioning overhead light, smiling. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood, waiting, and behind her, in the dark, something moved. I woke up with my hand on the doorknob to the platform. I hadn't realized I'd gotten out of bed. I didn't open the door. Later that morning, I checked the station logs again, the digital access record from the nearby motion sensors. There were entries I didn't recognize. 3 times during the night, motion had been detected on the west platform, but I hadn't heard anything. No alarms, no footsteps, only the sound of water dripping behind the walls. I decided to seal the hatch that evening, but when I returned to the advertising board, it was gone. The wall was seamless, like it had never been there at all, but I remembered the cold air, the rusted steps, the feeling that something below had opened its eye and seen me, and wasn't ready to close it again. I started leaving the work light on at night. There was no real reason, at least. None I could explain in the maintenance logs. The bulb flickered every few hours, but something about its weak, constant hum made the room feel less hollow. It was the quiet that got to me. The kind of silence you only find underground. No birds, no wind, no human breath. Just the long, low groan of a tunnel remembering it used to be alive. I didn't go looking for the hatch again, but it didn't matter. The next night, it found me, or rather a sound found me. A distant metallic clatter, like something dropped a crowbar on concrete, deep in the tunnel. I waited, holding my breath, counting the seconds between echoes. Nothing followed it. No footsteps. Just that one deliberate noise. I filed a note in the log. Unidentified tunnel disturbance. Possible pipe shift or structural resonance. A lie, technically, because what I heard wasn't structural. It was intentional. Day 7. I walked the length of the station to check the emergency relay cabinet. Standard protocol. But as I passed the old turnstiles, I noticed a smear of moisture on the wall. Faint, just above waist height. 5 vertical streaks. Like someone had dragged wet fingers along the tile. I touched it. It was cold. Sticky. Not water. Not quite. That night, the monitors flickered on their own. Their analog no-motion triggers, no AI, just hardwired lines from old tunnel cameras. Most of them hadn't shown anything but static since I arrived. But one Cam 6C, which faced the sealed end of the west tunnel, clicked into view just after midnight. The screen showed movement, something in the distance, too far to see clearly, just a blur at the edge of frame, low to the ground, barely distinguishable from the wall shadows. I watched for 5 full minutes. It didn't move closer, but it didn't leave either. In the morning, the feed was gone again. Static. I rewound the tape. It never recorded. Like that moment had happened outside the system, just for me. I tried calling the maintenance office. The uplink buzzed once, then silence. The manual override line didn't work either. The third time I tried, the screen displayed one message before shutting off completely. You are not the first. I stopped logging reports after that. They would have been full of things I couldn't explain. The smell of rain, even though we were 4 stories underground. The way my boots would be damp in the morning, even though the floor was dry. The voice I thought I heard in the vent, calling my name in my sister's tone. By the second week, the tunnel's layout had started to shift. I know how that sounds, but I walked it every morning, counted my steps, checked the station markers, measured the distance between the platform edge and the north wall. On day 13, it was 6 feet farther. On day 14, it was back to normal. On day 15, it was gone completely. Just open tunnel, no end wall. The space didn't feel like it had grown. I felt like I had shrunk. The dreams came back, not just of my sister, but of something behind her. A shape just out of sight, always at the edge of the frame. Tall, but wrong. Arms that bent too many times. A face like wet cement, smoothing over as I tried to focus. She would stand in front of it like she was protecting it, or worshiping it. She never looked afraid, only sorry. I woke up one morning to find an item sitting on my cot. A toy. Old. A tiny blue plastic elephant, its ears bent inward from age. I hadn't seen it in years. It had belonged to my sister. I remembered it from when we were kids. She used to tuck it into the pillowcase every night. I'd buried it with her. I ran. Straight up the corridor. Into the tunnel. Didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be away from the room, from the light, from the thing that left the toy. I must have walked for hours. But the tunnel never ended. Just curved slightly. Then again. Then again. Until I saw something ahead. A faint light. I followed it. and found myself standing in front of the utility room door. Not the back of it, the front, as though I'd never left. I stepped inside and found the toy was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall and watched the door. At 3:12 the light outside flickered once. Then I heard breathing. Not heavy, not human, just slow inhalation and a voice whispering, "You're almost hollow enough." The next morning, I checked the walls for cracks. I don't know why, but I found one just behind the power conduit. A hairline seam, narrow but long. I pressed my ear to it. I heard a sound. Not voices, not breathing. Typing, like dozens of fingers hammering out keystrokes on old mechanical keyboards. But it never formed words, just repetition. I don't leave the cot much anymore. The hallway outside changes now. The walls sometimes feel closer. The lights go dim, then flare again like someone is adjusting them just behind the ceiling tiles. Sometimes I hear footsteps above me. There is no floor above me. The hatch hasn't reappeared, but I know it will when the station decides I'm ready. I don't fear what's beneath anymore. I fear that it's not beneath at all, that it's already here, woven into the concrete, the rust, the very signal running through the relay monitors. Something that never left, something that wants me to stay. I stopped trusting time, not suddenly, gradually, like I was waking from a deep sleep into a room where all the clocks ran in different directions. At first it was the watch. It froze at 2:17 a.m. for what felt like hours, then skipped forward by 6, then reversed. I replaced the battery. It died within the hour. Then the wall timer on the console began counting faster, not seconds, frames, micro intervals I couldn't track. One night, I watched it loop. 3:12 3:12 3:8 3:12 over and over, until it hit 3:12:13. Then the lights cut out. I tried keeping a journal. That worked for a while, until I flipped back and realized some pages had been written in my handwriting, but not by me. Entries I don't remember making, phrases I would never use. The hallway turned again last night. I let it. She was in the vent this time. Closer, closer. The scratching stopped. I think it's inside now. I stopped writing. The journal wrote without me. Cam 6C came back. The static cleared just long enough for me to catch a glimpse. Not movement this time. A figure, standing at the far end of the tunnel. Same position as the one in my dreams. Same posture. A head tilted just too far. A shadowed mouth stretched long and low, open but silent. It didn't approach, but the frame began to drift. The camera itself was moving, slowly, panning toward the figure. That's impossible. The camera is bolted in place. I yanked the plug. When I rebooted, the feed was static again. But the camera, it was now angled differently, pointing directly down the center of the tunnel. Waiting. I stopped going outside, not because of what I saw, but because the hallway changed. It bent. The floor angled downward. The tiles began to pulse, faintly like breathing. And then, on the 14th day, a second door appeared. Same as the first. Same keypad. Same blinking green light. I hadn't opened it, but it was unlocked. I stood there for an hour, my hand hovering over the latch. Then I walked away. The next day, it was gone. I started hearing the tunnel sing. That's the only word I have for it. A low hum, almost harmonic. Not like music, more like resonance. Like the walls were echoing something they'd heard a long time ago and were trying to remember. It rose from the pipes at night, filled the utility room with vibration. Not loud, just deep, like it was coming from below my lungs. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. Sometimes the lights flicker in rhythm with the hum, and when they do, the reflection in the window, the one facing the tunnel, shows 3 figures. Me, something behind me, and something just outside the glass. Each time I blink, they shift positions. One closer, one further, like a slow, deliberate waltz. I saw my sister again, not in a dream. She was standing on the opposite platform when the tunnel lights came on by themselves. No expression, no movement, just standing. She opened her mouth, and then her face folded in. Not bloody, not violent, just reversed, like it was turning inside out. The lights went dark. When they came back, the platform was empty, but the bench now held the blue toy elephant. This time, I didn't pick it up. I tried to leave the next morning. Packed what little I had, marched down the corridor, through the hallway, toward the original stairwell. Only the stairwell wasn't there. Just a wall, solid concrete, a small plaque embedded in the middle, engraved with 5 words. You were always down here. I screamed then, louder than I've ever screamed in my life. Not because I was afraid, but because, for a brief, horrifying second, I believed it. Since then, the relay station has grown. I don't know how. There are new rooms. A second sleeping chamber with no bed. A mirrored hallway that distorts my shadow but not my reflection. A stairwell that descends without steps, just a slope and the sound of rushing water. I don't remember them being constructed. They simply are. Each morning, something new is there, as though the station is learning me, one layer at a time, building itself around my shape, around my grief. I've begun dreaming of the tunnel from above, like I'm looking down through transparent soil. The station glows a faint blue pulse, and beneath it, far deeper than any foundation should reach, there's a chamber, circular, organic, and inside, them coiled around each other like roots, long limbs, blank faces, breathing in slow harmony, and in the center a chair, empty, waiting. The cameras all show static now, except one. The feed from Cam 6C sometimes flickers at 3:12 a.m., only for a second. But every time it does, I see myself in the frame, not standing, not walking, but seated, staring back, smiling. I woke up to the smell of earth, Not the dry dust of subway stone, but rich soil, loamy, alive. The kind of scent you only notice in spring right after a thaw. That impossible moment when the ground exhales. Except I was underground. Except there had been no thaw. Only the same static air I'd been breathing for weeks. The utility room had changed again. The ceiling was higher. The cot had vanished, and the door was gone. In its place, a tunnel of wet roots, grown through cracked tile and concrete. The walls pulsed faintly, like lungs inhaling the silence. I didn't panic. I think I was past that. I picked up my flashlight and stepped forward. The passage curved sharply, narrowing as it turned. It smelled stronger down there, like rot beneath something sweet. My boots stuck slightly as I moved. After 20 or 30 steps, I found the first mirror, set into the wall. Not glass, water, a flat surface, still as bone, smooth as black ice. When I leaned in, it showed a reflection that wasn't mine. Not quite. My face, my features, but no eyes, just two wide voids. And when it opened its mouth, it whispered, "We're almost aligned." I didn't respond. I moved on. More tunnels, more mirrors. Each one showed a different version of me. One with a missing jaw, one smiling too wide, eyes rotating in slow, wet circles. One curled into a fetal position, rocking against glass. I kept walking, and eventually, I reached the chamber. It wasn't built. It was grown. A sphere of exposed root and wire. Moist walls breathing in time with my pulse. In the center, a pit of glowing light. Above it, the chair. Old, rusted. It looked like a cross between a subway seat and an operating table. Behind it, the figure, the same one I'd seen in dreams, in Cam 6C, in the corner of my peripheral vision. It stood at least 8 feet tall. Its limbs were thin and long, too long. Its face had no features, just the imprint of suggestion, a hint of eye sockets, a memory of a mouth. It didn't speak. It transmitted, not with words, with feeling. All at once, it hit me like a flood. 1,000 memories I didn't recognize. Moments of grief from strangers. Regrets. Isolation. Cold metal rails. Abandoned homes. Lost voices calling through walls. Grief in every form. It filled the room like mist. And beneath it all, a single truth. This is where all the forgotten come. The relay wasn't a station. It was a filter, a collection point, a mouth in the soil of the city, open for decades, feeding on those who slipped through the cracks. Not in violence, not in cruelty, just absorption. It didn't want to consume me. It wanted to echo me, to preserve something real. To file away my loneliness alongside all the others, storing it in its living memory like a stone dropped in still water. The chair pulsed once, and I knew I had sat in it before. Not once, many times. I had walked this tunnel, through these roots, reached this room, and chosen. Each time, I forgot. Each time, I began again. The figure stepped aside, inviting, and I stepped forward because I remembered then, not just my sister, but what I had come here to do. When she died, I stopped being a person. I became a shadow. I'd felt it walking through the world like a passenger in my own body, pretending to care, nodding when spoken to, smiling in photos I didn't remember taking. The world above didn't know what to do with grief like mine, but this place did. It listened. It remembered. And it offered a home. I sat in the chair. The light beneath pulsed brighter. The walls began to tremble. The figure behind me placed one long hand on my shoulder. I closed my eyes, and I saw everything. All the others who had sat here, all the fragments of sorrow that had been filed into the earth, not lost, just looped, whispering forever in the wires, in the roots, in the pulse of the relay. And then I heard her voice, clear, close. You don't have to carry it anymore. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the platform, alone. The station was silent, still. The camera in the corner blinked red. Watching, recording, waiting. The light never came back. Not fully. Just a faint blue haze that seeped from cracks in the tunnel walls, like bioluminescence deep underwater. The fluorescent bulbs no longer buzzed. The relay console blinked slowly, as if breathing. And I was still here, but different. I walked the platform now, barefoot. I don't remember when I stopped needing my boots. The ground is warm. It hums gently beneath each step, like an old motor buried far below. Sometimes I think I can feel footsteps echoing up from beneath me, not mine. Just others, circling, pacing in patterns I no longer recognize. Sometimes I pace with them. There are no clocks. I no longer need them. Days blur in the soft pulse of light. I eat, though I don't know where the food comes from anymore. It's always there, beside the cot, which has returned. Clean sheets, folded blanket, as though the station is taking care of me now, or preserving me. I still hear her voice sometimes. My sister, not calling for help, not crying, just humming. The same lullaby she used to hum when we were kids. Out of tune, no real rhythm, but perfect. Perfect in that it could only come from her. I tried writing again. The journal was back on the desk one morning, open to a blank page. I wrote, I remember now. The ink bled through the paper, soaked it, like the journal drank the words. I turned the page. Another was blank. I wrote again. I chose to stay. That page didn't soak. It burned just slightly, edges curling, then healed, back to blank. I don't try anymore. Sometimes I sit at the end of the platform and stare into the tunnel. The lights never reach far, but I see shapes, standing just beyond the edge of illumination. Not threatening, not waiting, just mirroring. When I lean left, so do they. When I breathe, they shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. Some are shaped like me. Some are shaped like nothing I can name. But they are mine, pieces of me, echoes. There's a door at the far end of the hall now. It's always closed, but once, just Once it was open. Inside, a small room with glass walls, like a subway control center. And in the center, a chair, facing a panel. Above it, a monitor. On that screen, my life. Clips, out of order. My sister's laughter. A fight with my father. Me in college, sleeping through class. Me walking, lost, on the day after her funeral. Me standing before this very tunnel, unaware I had been here before. I stood and watched. The figure from the chamber stood behind me again, hand on my shoulder, and this time I turned to face it. I asked not aloud, not in words, why me? Its response was not language, but I understood, because you were already fading, because you were already half gone, because your grief was loud enough to reach the wires. I wept, not from fear, from relief. I had spent so long trying to feel human again, trying to force joy, normalcy, purpose. But the station didn't ask for that. It asked only for truth. It recorded me as I was, and offered to hold me. I have stopped fighting it, stopped looking for exits, stopped asking what day it is, because I know now, this station is not beneath the city. It is beneath memory, beneath everything we bury when we pretend to move on. It is where the lost go when they are too quiet to be noticed, too tired to be found. The final note I leave, not for rescue, not for warning,